Good morning, members. Welcome back, shall I say. To start things off with a health and safety announcement, there is no fire alarm drill anticipated today. So if the alarm sounds, please leave the building through the nearest fire exit by following the signs above the doors. Make your way to the rear of the car park and wait there until you are told it is safe to return. And also please make sure all phones are either muted or switched off. To start the meeting proper then, good morning everyone and welcome to this Strategic Planning Committee meeting on Friday the 1st of November 2024. This meeting is to consider site allocations deferred from the meeting on Tuesday 29th October, which was adjourned just before 8 o'clock for those who weren't following along on YouTube. I'm your chair, Councillor Todd Olive, and to my right is Vice Chair Councillor Mike Howe. Supporting officers present are Ed Freeman, Assistant Director of Planning, Strategy and Development Management, Matt Dickens, Planning Policy Manager, Anita Williams, Principal Solicitor, and Wendy Harris, Democratic Services Officer. Can I remind everyone present that this meeting is audio recorded for subsequent publication on the Council's website, so please can members and officers making a contribution to the meeting use a microphone or your comments will not be recorded. We will now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with yourself, Councillor Olive.
I am present and I have nothing to declare.
Councillor Mike Howe.
I am present and again nothing to declare.
Thank you. Councillor Jess Bailey.
Present and nothing to declare.
Thank you. Councillor Colin Brown.
Present, nothing to declare.
Thank you. I believe Councillor Fernley will be arriving later, so I'll move on to Councillor Hayward. Oh, you're not looked in.
Present and just an effects NRI. I have received several emails which could constitute lobbying in relation to the Hall Church application. Thank you, Chair. Allocation, sorry, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ingham.
I'm present, nothing to declare except for lobbying.
Councillor Young.
I'm here and except for lobbying, nothing to declare.
Thank you. And Councillor Levine.
Present, awake and nothing to declare.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item 2, apologies. I have councillors Bethany Collins, Davey, Brian Bailey and Parr on my list.
Councillor Blakey.
Okay, thank you. Which brings us then to the remaining items from the allocation site selections report on Tuesday that we have yet to consider, which appears as agenda item 3 on today's agenda. And before we start off with sites in Fennerton, Mr. Freeman has a bit of an update for us.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So members will recall that when we started this meeting on Tuesday, we had a shortfall of 2,278 homes to find in order to meet the housing requirement figure set by government plus a 10% headroom. At Tuesday's meeting, members agreed to allocate sites equivalent to 1,567 dwellings, which leaves a shortfall of 711 homes to find during the course of today's meeting. I think that's it in terms of update, really, on terms of numbers. So the proposal is to continue through the agenda of sites as per the agenda on Tuesday, which leaves us looking at sites at and around Fennerton. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Okay, we will start off then. Mr. Dickens.
Thank you, Chair. Does the slideshow?
Oh, yes.
So whilst Wendy sets the slideshow up, just really to go over ground that we've covered before, but to explain that we have gone through a logical process for site assessment and identification. It followed a staged process that was rigorous and analytical in its nature. And what this led us up to is, if you like, a bottom-up component of our work, which was site assessment, and a top-down component which looked at the housing requirements, in particular in employment as well, but we're concentrating on housing. So there is clearly a government housing requirement that we need to respond to. We've looked at how we respond to that in the context of a spatial strategy, which has formed a key element of the, if you like, the top-down looking at the process, and into this, the bottom-up element was the site assessment work that we've undertaken. So in much simplified form, that's the type of process we've been through, and it leads us straight on to Fennerton. You'll see on the plan ahead of you a number of sites at Fennerton to consider. A number of sites were submitted through the process, the HELA process, and through the site selection and assessment. And we start with GHED 38.
We certainly do. Thank you, Mr. Dickens. And we start with Fennerton Parish Council. If that's the way round you want to do it, we've ordinarily been going Parish Council, then landowner / developer, then District Council, but I'm happy to make an exception.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the opportunity. Dear committee, you've heard many times by now why some of the sites you're now revisiting should have been rejected, so I'm not about to go through them again. However, I would like to leave you with some observations about this allocation process. I believe that the exercise of revisiting sites previously deemed unsuitable simply to come up with government-imposed housing numbers is unsustainable for the fabric and well-being of our communities. This committee can move the goalposts around as much as they like. The reality is one for the residents will face in this avalanche of housing allocations if it's dumped on them. They will face it every day with jammed up country lanes, an overflowing sewage system, increased flooding, and despair and stress at the loss of their village identity. One wonders where we will look when we're faced with the same numbers game in 10 years' time. Someone has to say at some point there is no more land to build on. By undertaking the apparently frantic search for elusive numbers now, you've also effectively neutralised all the hard work you have undertaken over the past many long months. Some of the Fennerton sites you're now looking at were turned down in the 2014 public inquiry. The reasons for refusal then are even more relevant today. These must be rejected today for the same reasons. Of particular concern to me is the officer reasoning for not including in the housing numbers any of the current planning applications. To not include these, nor recognise more recent developments in the village, is to distort the true picture of how much this village has sacrificed for East Devon in the rampage to achieve housing targets. Fennerton has done its bit, and I urge the committee to give this extra weighting in your deliberations and reject all of the Fennerton sites before you today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bruce. Fennerton Parish Council.
Thank you. Fennerton Parish Council supports the officer recommendation to not allocate this site for housing in the local plan. The sheer scale of this site has alarmed the village, to say the very least, and the committee will not need reminding that in your approved settlement hierarchy, Fennerton is defined as a Tier 4 settlement, a service village. Under your agreed local plan strategy, you envisage for such settlements modest growth sufficient to meet local needs. The allocation of a site of this magnitude would directly contradict that strategy and be wholly unsustainable. Fennerton Parish has the lowest jobs to work ratio in the district. There is already a large daily outflow of commuters to employment locations beyond the village and vice versa. The inadequate public transport available to the village for commuting means that the vast majority of these journeys are by car. Worse still, the village is served only by country lanes, and no route into the village is free of a pinch point where two vehicles cannot pass, including the main access to the A30. There's one small convenience store, no medical facility, limited leisure provision in the village. The narrow access lanes are without footways, are not safe or conducive to walking, cycling, or other more sustainable travel methods, and residents are very car dependent for a wide range of daily activities. Adding further large-scale housing to the village will make this intolerably worse and is contrary to your agreed strategy for sustainable living and your favoured concept of 20-minute communities. Large-scale housing must be closer to existing Tier 1, Tier 2 and 3 settlements where there are jobs and services in line with your spatial strategy. The site at Sherwood Cross would be completely contrary to that measured approach. Furthermore, all of this site is productive, high-quality agricultural land, and the site is on the wrong side of the level crossing in the village for most of the journeys to the A30. Part of the site also lies between Cheriton Hill and the village, and as agricultural land absorbs a lot of the water runoff before it reaches the village. Nevertheless, Colstock Lane floods several times a year. I just remind you, Chairman, that in the consultation response to the first draft of the local plan, you received from Fennerton a petition signed by more than 500 residents opposed to mass housing at Fennerton. A public meeting to discuss this site specifically attracted more than 100 residents unanimous in their opposition. The residents of Fennerton do not see a case for large-scale housing in their village, and the parish council supports them.
Okay, thank you. We come into committee then, and I'm going to start us off by recommending that we move on from this site and proposing that from the chair. Councillor Bailey.
Please, can I ask that we have the Ed Freeman's chart up on our screens like we did on Tuesday, was it now? So that then we can just see that where we are with with all the different numbers for our villages. Thank you.
Let me just zoom in a bit. I assume it's Fennerton in particular you're interested in, Councillor Bailey.
Fennerton, but all the villages and the towns, because we have to be applying our hierarchy and making sure that we're not allocating too many in our villages, not enough in our towns. There's some kind of consistency, and just so that we have that when we're making decisions or allocations or not allocations.
Yeah, so so obviously you've got the places in column A. Column B is what's been allocated so far. I think column C is recommendations, and then D is the total. Obviously, this is recommendations that are in this agenda, so some of these have already been agreed or moved on from. But Fennerton, for example, currently has an allocation of 42, and proposed in this agenda you have an additional 83 recommended for allocation there. Does that help?
Councillor Ingham.
Chair, a question about the process. For example, I'm not, this is just an example for Fennerton. If we're going to look, let's say there's 5 sites, and for 3 of them, the recommendation is no, and 2, the recommendation is yes. For me, common sense says you look at the ones you think you've got first, those yeses, you agree them, but if you don't and you move on, you've still got the other ones that you can consider. But by the methodology that you're using, you're not enabling us to review a site and enable the correct number, the target number, having listened to the local parish.
We're
What
going
have I
to go.
misunderstood about that?
We're going to go through the agenda in the order it's set out. We don't have a large number of sites left to get through. Let's get through them, and if we don't have the numbers at the end of the day,
Haven't answered my question, Chair.
I have answered the question in the sense that this is the way we're going to do it. It's the way we've done it so far, and for consistency, it's the way we're going to keep going. Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Chair, because I don't think we can suddenly now change how we're approaching it. You know, we've done 12 hours of a meeting on Tuesday following this methodology, and I think you're right to continue with it. I think it is helpful to see that because actually, when you look at Fennerton, it does jump out with regards, you know, the other villages, the other tier 4 villages, and I think that is helpful to have that in our mind as we go through the discussion on Fennerton. So thank you for putting that up.
Okay, thank you, members. You have a proposal from the chair to move on from this site. Does anybody have any comments to make? No, okay, in which case we'll take that to a vote then. The proposal is to move on from GHED 38. All those in favour, please. That's unanimous. So we come then to Fenny 01, Fennerton Parish Council.
Thank you, Chair. The Parish Council supports the officer's recommendation to not allocate this site for housing in the local plan. The access to this site is on a very narrow lane which floods regularly. The current flood alleviation scheme will not relieve this part of the village when completed. There are no footpaths nor street lighting along this lane, and it would not be attractive for walking, cycling or other more sustainable travel methods. The site is not well connected to the village, and residents, parents would still be reliant on cars to travel to the school, local facilities and for any other daily activities. The site is near a very small hamlet, slightly distant from the main village, and would harmfully alter the character of this part of the parish. Again, the allocation of this site, in addition to those already allocated in Fennerton, would contradict the spatial strategy for modest growth sufficient to meet local needs in a Tier 4 service village. It would not represent sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, Councillor Young.
Can we move on, please? I totally agree with the Parish Council's assessment.
Agreed. Seconded.
Okay, you have a proposal and appropriately seconded from Fenny 01. Any further comments? No, okay, we'll go to a vote on that one then. The proposal from Councillor Young, seconded by Councillor Jess Bailey, is to move on from Fenny 01. All those in favour, please. That's unanimous. Fenny 07, the Parish Council.
Thank you, Chairman. Fennerton Parish Council supports the officer recommendation to not allocate this site for housing in the local plan. The site is the location of the catchment for the much needed flood alleviation works on the eastern side of Fennerton. Works are actually contained within this precise site. It is a sloping site where runoff from Cheriton Hill flows down to the village. In other words, it is part of the eastern side of the bowl in which Fennerton sits and where runoff is to be intercepted. The flood alleviation scheme has been designed to deal with the current serious flooding problems experienced in Fennerton. It has not been designed to accept further stormwater runoff from new development. It would be entirely counterproductive to build more hard surface on the exact site where the new flood relief scheme is attempting to solve a current problem for the existing village. In addition, a new road access would have to be created very close to the village primary school, with the inherent danger and inconvenience that that would bring. In the view of the Parish Council, this is not a viable site.
Thank you. Members, Councillor Jess Bailey.
Propose we move on.
Okay, I will second that. Any other members wish to speak? Okay, in which case the proposal is to move on from Fenny 07 by Councillor Jess Bailey, seconded by Councillor Olive. All those in favour, please. That's unanimous. We come then to Fenny 08. Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you, Chair. Fenton Parish Council objects to the proposal to allocate site Fenny 08 for housing in the local plan. This site was the subject of a planning inquiry in 2014, where both the district and parish councils argued that Fenton is not a sustainable location for large-scale housing. The planning inspector agreed and rejected the developer's appeal. The planning inspector concluded that, and I quote, "The harm the proposed development would cause to the character and appearance of the area is an adverse impact of considerable weight. That permitting 83 homes on appeal would have had adverse consequences for the community, which carries some weight against permitting the proposed development. This development would harmfully alter the character of this part of Fenton. It would encroach into the existing gap between the two parts of the settlement and have an adverse visual impact." She concluded that to allow the large-scale houses in Fenton would harm community cohesion. Now, in 2024, nothing has changed. In fact, conditions are arguably worse. With limited public transport, very few local jobs, and limited local services, any new residents will be very reliant on unsustainable car travel. Green Lane itself is very narrow, with no footpaths, and is totally inappropriate for the additional traffic that would be generated. Such traffic would instead exit the development on Station Road, close to the primary school, with its paediatric congestion and inherent danger to children. The school itself is at capacity with no space to expand. There is no confidence in the village that the sewage system has the capacity for any further development. The regular occurrence of sewage backing up into homes and bursting out of manhole covers in the road is very distressing, and South West Water frequently have to tank a sewage away from the village pumping station or discharge waste into the local watercourse. As stated before, your local plan strategy anticipates modest growth to meet local need for Fenton. Allocation of 86 dwellings on top of the 42 already allocated by committee is not modest growth. It is not strategic to simply alter the definition of Fenton as a Tier 4 service village in order to justify the allocation of additional housing. To do this will leave the council open to challenge at the local plan examination in public. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blackmore. Members? Okay, I'll put my head on the chopping block first then. I'm afraid I'm minded to agree with officer's assessment. I don't particularly like it, but I think given the constraints we are under, Fenny 08 is probably the remaining least worst site in the village. I'm not going to make a proposal at this point though, because I want to hear what everybody else thinks. Councillor Jess Bailey.
Thank you. I disagree with you because I think it's too many houses. It's too many for Tier 4 settlement. We can't have our towns, Tier 2, Budley, even with their allocation, having 70 houses, and then a settlement that's 2 tiers below having 120. And it's just, I just don't think it's fair. I don't think it meets the criteria of modest growth to meet the local needs. And I don't think it's reasonable. And I think we have to apply, I'm not saying we have to apply identical numbers for every Tier 4 settlement, but we have to have a consistent approach. And I think it will be challenged at examination. And I just think it's to have allocated potentially 40 odd, I can't remember the exact number, and then to now try and allocate 86. I understand the difficulties, but I think it's too many. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Councillor Young.
Sticking my head on the block, I disagree with Councillor Bailey. I know Fenton well because I've been involved in the flood alleviation scheme, and I've walked around the village a number of times. I know there's problems with flooding. This site is less vulnerable than some of the than all the rest. As you say, it is the least worst, and other villages have had far more proposals that put forward than Fennerton. So I would propose for it to go forward.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Young. Are you seconding, Councillor Ingham? Okay, I need to look for a seconder before I take any further comments. Councillor Levine, do you wish to speak? Okay, in which case, Councillor Ingham.
Can I ask you to turn to page 354 on the agenda?
Could you speak up a bit?
Can I ask you to turn to page 354 on the agenda where it says, should the site be allocated, and it says no.
He says no on mine.
Councillor Ingham is correct that the technical report that sits at appendix, whatever it is, says no. I'll come to Mr. Freeman at this point.
Yes, apologies, it's Appendix 1, I think it's page 232 in the agenda I've got open. Page 232 within that appendix. So yes, it does say no. Members may recall that our previous recommendation on the site was not to allocate, primarily because of concerns about the scale of development at Fennerton, but you'll see the assessment was very borderline and points out that there are no specific constraints to this site. It was an issue about the scale of development at Fennerton, which we've unfortunately had to revisit in terms of trying to meet the housing numbers. Well, I'm speaking, I'll come back on Councillor Bailey's point about the relationship with Budleigh. I think the difference here, as we know, is Budleigh Salterton is washed over national landscape, and therefore the constraints in that location are much greater, even though it's a bigger settlement with more services and facilities than Fennerton, whereas Fennerton doesn't have those sort of high-level landscape constraints, and so there is more scope to accommodate development in that location because of that. I think we share the concerns about where is an appropriate scale of growth within the settlement, but I don't feel that what we're proposing here is excessive. It's certainly on the high side for a Tier 4 settlement, but we don't feel it's excessive.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Freeman. Councillor Bailey?
Yeah, I mean, it's not, sorry, it's back to, oh, I've pressed Jeff. Sorry. It's not just Budleigh though, is it? Because actually, if you're looking at the percentage of growth, it would be a much higher growth figure here, percentage figure here, than Sidmouth, Exmouth, I can't even remember the other towns, Honiton. So, you know, it's not just about Budleigh.
She's right, Mr. Freeman.
I haven't worked it out as a percentage of the population, but the population of Fennerton is quite similar to Woodbury, where you've allocated over 200 homes.
But Woodbury's at a higher tier, isn't it?
It is a higher tier settlement, but so are Budleigh Salterton, Sidmouth and the other settlements mentioned. So this is part of the challenge I think we have in making allocations in this planning, that some of our higher tier settlements are in very sensitive landscape locations in terms of national landscape issues, and therefore their capacity to accommodate the levels of growth that the strategy might suggest just isn't there. And so in order to accommodate growth, that growth is sort of cascading down the settlement hierarchy, unfortunately, but it's difficult to find an alternative solution that meets the housing need.
Councillor Ingham?
Chair, I will second this. Oh, all right, okay. Well, I will be supporting it. But it's very apparent as we move on that the hierarchy of settlements is a finger in the air, isn't it? It doesn't stack up at all. We have scant regard for existing land designations, unless it suits particular ward members. or it suits the argument of officers on one occasion, then it's radically different the next. And going through the minutes as we have, I understand, I can understand that officers may choose to change their recommendation in order to help us achieve our land supply. But if you were to, as an outsider, to go through our agendas and our minutes, our decisions, having already gone through our draft policies, from which we set up a couple of years ago, and said what we are going to do, and we turned down alternative strategies, but we're not actually implementing the one that we adopted, which is that hierarchy of settlements. And I can understand why a whole set of settlements, communities will be aggrieved by this, whichever tier they're in, because then some of them, whichever tier they're in, are not being treated with the rationale we adopted with the 4 tiers of settlements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ingham. Are there any other comments on the site specifically? Councillor Hayward, then Councillor Brown, and then I'm going to take us to a vote.
Thank you, Chair. On this one, I'm minded personally that this is one where we do have to say no. If this were a lower, I appreciate it's been done on there's a methodology for the number of properties, but I feel this is disproportionate. And as Councillor Bailey says, it's just a little too much for it. And we all know the challenges that Fennerton's having. We wouldn't be investing millions in flood alleviation in the village if that were not so. So if this number of dwellings is to remain the same, and I've just tried to map out the houses nearby with the UHA that they have, and a similar size area seems to have about 35, 40 properties in it. Appreciate as you move further west into the village, the density increases, but you are on the periphery of the village. So on that basis, if that number remains unchanged, and I don't know whether we can, as a committee, suggest a smaller allocation, I'll defer to you on that and on officers, but at the moment, I'm minded to go against the proposal from Councillor Young on this. I think it's just a little too much, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
I don't think this site should be allocated. There's far too many properties for it. Fennerton is known for its flooding. I mean, in the last 15 years or so, it's been badly flooded at least twice. I know they've got a flood alleviation scheme on there, but is it sufficient for more houses? No, it's not. It's only caters for the number of properties that are there at the moment. If we allocate this, we're allocating problems.
Okay, hearing some of the concerns then, I'm going to suggest to the proposer and seconder that perhaps they might wish to consider amending their proposal to allocate 60 dwellings rather than 83 on the same site area. I appreciate it's not a radical difference.
I was going to suggest 40. So, hearing what people are saying, I would think 40 would be a more appropriate figure.
I would suggest 40 would be extremely low density on that site area. I appreciate it is on the edge of the village, as Councillor Hayward says, and that it would need to be sensitively treated in terms of the density on the edges of the site, the landscaping around the boundaries of the site, but that may not even be viable at 40 dwellings. But it's within the gift of committee to change the numbers if they feel that's appropriate.
I go with 60 and see how we go.
Councillor Levine, are you satisfied with that as the proposal?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, are there any comments specifically on that change? Councillor Ingham?
Yes, Chair. I want to ask Mr. Freeman a question. Say we change this to 60. We're not the landowner or the potential developer. If they come back with an application for 90, how relevant is our number 60? Do you see what I'm saying? What's the point in changing the number? Can you explain that to me?
Well, an application for a higher number wouldn't accord with the local plan in that sense, but it would be a matter of whether or not their application for a higher number is acceptable in its own right, having regard to the same concerns the committee have raised about the density of development in that location, the scale of development at Fennerton, the landscape setting of the village and the rural character of that edge of the village. But if they could achieve a higher number and satisfy all of those issues, then it would be for planning committee to determine whether as a deviation from the local plan, they're happy with that.
Councillor Bailey, quickly, yeah?
Can I ask Mr. Freeman, but we're not duty bound to allocate the whole of that area, are we? We don't have, it's not a choice of, well, we have to allocate that entire site, oh, well, we'll allocate 60, because surely if, I mean, I don't want to see any of that allocated, but if push came to shove, you could draw a much smaller, a reduced area, couldn't you?
Yes, indeed, that's officers are not recommending to allocate all of the area that's been put forward. The proposal is to allocate the bulk of the site, the northern part, but the sort of southern toe, the south side of the road, we're not proposing to allocate because it's more sensitive in landscape terms. If members wanted to allocate a smaller area than that, it's within their gift to do that. But I think we need to think carefully about what the logic of that would be. Is it about the scale of development in Fennerton, or is it because there's concerns that particular parts of the site are more sensitive or less acceptable, so that we're clear about why we're doing that and why that particular part of the site is more acceptable.
Councillors Young, Levine, are you happy with your proposal as it stands to allocate 60 on the northern part of that site, north of the road? Okay, I'm going to take us to a vote on that then, and we'll see how that goes. The proposal from Councillor Young, seconded by Councillor Levine, is to allocate the northern part of Fenny 08 north of Green Lane for 60 dwellings in the local plan. All those in favour, please. That's 5. Those against? That's 3, and those abstaining will be none. So that is carried, which brings us then to Fenny 10. The Parish Council.
Thank you, Chair. Fennerton Parish Council supports the officer recommendation to not allocate this site for housing in the local plan. The site is situated above the village and would have significant adverse impact due to increased flooding risk. It is on a sloping site where runoff from Cheriton Hill flows down to the eastern edge of the village. The new flood alleviation scheme has been designed to deal with the current serious flooding problems and not to accommodate further stormwater runoff from new developments. Development in this location risks undermining the beneficial impact of the flood relief scheme. The access to this site is on a narrow lane with a blind bend. There are no footpaths linking to the site to either Old or New Fennerton and no street lighting. This sunken lane joining Old and New Fennerton is totally inappropriate for the additional traffic that would be generated. The site is near the old village of Fennerton and would significantly encroach into the existing gap between the two parts of the village. Fennerton residents have constantly expressed a wish to see this gap maintained to retain the character of the old village. Strategically, residents of Fennerton do not see a valid case for large-scale housing in Tier 4 village, and the parish council supports them. This is not a viable site. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blackmore. I'm, in view of the discussion that we have just had, I'm going to propose that we move on from both Fenny 10 and Fenny 14. And I'll propose that from the chair. Do any members wish to speak on either of those sites? Okay, in which case, well, we have seen the officer report. Do you want to show us the slide quickly, Mr. Dickens? There you go. That's Fenny 14 on the west side. The recommendation is not to allocate. Hopefully members have read the report. We'll go to a vote on that then. The proposal from the chair is to move on from both Fenny 10 and Fenny 14. All those in favour, please. That is unanimous. Okay, which brings us to the end of Fennerton. Thank you very much for your contributions, folks. Which brings us then to Hawkchurch, which generated some discussion at its last appearance. Mr. Dickens, do you want to fill us in on changes to this site since we last saw it, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Essentially, what you'll see in the paperwork in front of you is a suggestion for a much smaller site for development, bringing it down to 12 homes, and also a suggested policy approach which seeks to provide for employment land provision allocation as well as part of the what would be a small mixed-use development. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dickens. And we have Councillor Mo Dodson from Hawkchurch Parish Council.
He's just making his way down from the gallery.
Ah.
I've just
Okay.
seen him.
Thank you. In which case, while we wait... Oh, no, here we go. Councillor Dodson, your 3 minutes.
Thank you. I've been delegated by the Parish Council to present the raw data we collected in our survey of residents' views of proposal Hawk 01. The questions in the survey relevant to Hawk 01 were a small part of a larger survey we carried out in 2023 as part of our research for the neighbourhood plan. The design of the questionnaire and the collection and collation of the data has been carried out by a working group headed by the chair of Hawkchurch Parish Council. We analysed the data relevant to Hawk 01 immediately in order to respond to the local plan consultation at that time. Analysis of the rest of the survey has been delayed due to the large number of other substantial planning submissions we've had to deal with, but we hope to finish this work soon. Hawkchurch Parish has 240 properties on the electoral roll. Only 117 of these are within the settlement boundary as per the figures in the SPC documents of September 2022. We had 133 responses to the survey, more than 50% of households in the parish. What do the residents want? 10% no development, 44% less than 20 dwellings, 14% 20 dwellings, 17% 25 dwellings, 15% 38 dwellings, 3% 50 or more, 2% gave no response. The intervals of 20, 25 and 38 and so on copy the options cited in the original HELA assessment. The latest proposal from officers is for 12 dwellings, which would be acceptable to 44% of respondents, by far the largest proportion of respondents. However, the most recent proposal's housing density in a smaller area may well be out of character for the village, and we are puzzled by the proposed change to the size of the area suggested for development. 59% of respondents agreed with the preferred site. The community shock, we expressed concern at the working group, not the SPC meeting, about the sustainability of the community SOC, which we would not wish to be put in jeopardy by higher ground rents or business rates. Local infrastructure, an appropriate scale of development is crucial to ensuring that the impact on local infrastructure and traffic volume is safe and sustainable. Residents walk frequently on these lanes and roads which have no pavements, and at night there is only minimal street lighting. The village is accessed via narrow lanes, and the absence of any viable public transport, one bus journey to Axminster and back on a Thursday, means that daily car use is the norm for most households. Thank you. Press the left one.
Yes, right.
Thank you, Councillor Dodson. Councillor Mackinder.
Thank you, Chair. Hawkchurch Parish Council consulted its residents, as we've heard eloquently from Councillor Dodson, in order to form preparation of a neighbourhood plan. And one facet of that survey, as you've heard, was to seek views on two sites, and Hawk 01 being one of those. Councillor Dodson has eloquently outlined the results of those. I had hoped we'd get the pie charts on the screen at the same time, because it makes it easier to understand those figures. However, I think that the Parish Council have done a very thorough job of analysing their survey, and I really recommend to the committee that we take those results and give them serious consideration in your decision making. The agenda pack notes that due to concerns expressed at the prior SBC on the 20th of September that the 38 dwellings is too many for this site, and it's now proposed to allocate only part of the site for 12 dwellings. This revised recommendation, as you've heard from Councillor Dodson, aligns better with community views. It also reduces, but does not eliminate, resultant increased nutrient emissions, which run counter to the district's nutrient neutrality requirement in the Axe catchment. Any development in Hawkchurch is contrary to the district's desire to place new developments where residents have the option to use public transport to support local needs, for example, work, shopping, health, etc. I recommend the committee to use this lower allocation, as I realise the requirement of EDDC to create a valid local plan incorporating required housing allocations and endeavouring to spread the load across the district where possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mackinder. Councillor Jess Bailey.
Can I just check on... Sorry, I keep pressing the wrong microphone. Jeff's microphone. Can I just check, are there any other allocations in Hawkchurch? No. Okay, thank you.
Nice, easy one. Members. Councillor Ingham.
Listening to what Councillor Dodson said. Was it Dodson? Interesting that they bothered as a community to do a bit of research and feedback, and I'm impressed with that. If you've got perhaps nearly 50% of the community saying this is tolerable, that's almost shockingly good, Chair, I would suggest. I may have got this wrong, the difference to looking at a map and looking at a landscape. They are radically different. But it's rather nice, the location of this, on how it hopefully over the decades will fit in with the settlement of Hawkchurch, with jobs. I think this is certainly one of the better options that we have. And I'd already done the sums, the 10%. I think that's acceptable. I think Hawkchurch can cope with that. I would certainly go for approval and wish them the best with making their community sustainable. Good choice.
Thank you, Councillor Ingham. Was that a proposal?
Yeah.
Okay, does anybody wish to second? Councillor Hayward, do you wish to speak?
Please, Chair. This has been quite an acrimonious allocation, and I'm grateful to Councillor Dodson for coming to speak today. I suppose, if I may, a question, having already seconded it, a question to Mr. Freeman. As a settlement, Hawkchurch, what percentage of these dwellings, if it went through the process and were built out, would be affordable? Is it below the threshold where they would be obliged to make a contribution, or would it still be built out?
Yeah, so it's above, so it's 10 or more is the threshold in rural areas. But we haven't determined percentages for affordable housing yet. That's for a future meeting. But we would
Draft policy would be 4, wouldn't it? And what was considered a Reg 18? 35%, a third.
yes, we consulted on 35%, so based on that, but we need to bring the viability work to you at a future meeting to make that decision. So I wouldn't want to commit to a percentage at this stage.
Well, I mean, Hawkchurch has benefited in the past from some very aesthetic social housing that blend into the Hawkchurch village landscape, streetscape very well, and I'd hope this could be taken through with this allocation. Certainly the retention of the shop is a key factor here. If that were not being put on the table, I'd have to just go against this because it's so critical to the people of Hawkchurch. And I hope that when this goes through the local plan's adopted, and we get to the planning stage, that the planning committee at the time are minded to recall this conversation that we had today and the representations from residents and their views from their own surveys. So happy to second, Chair, and happier that we've gone down from 38 to 12 as per officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayward. Just to check, Mr. Freeman, I think the plan is that retention of the shop will be a condition in this policy allocation.
Yes, so that would be a requirement of the policy alongside the delivery of the employment land as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Freeman. Thank you, members. Councillor Brown.
One thing that concerns me about this is their bus service. Yeah, we're encouraging people to drive their cars if we approve this, because their bus service is only once a week on a Thursday and it goes from Hawkchurch into Axminster. I think it leaves at 10:20 and goes back at 2:50, I think it is. That service is run by Dorset Council, paid by Devon County Council. And I went into Axminster Market last week, and on that bus there was 4 people and a dog. They're not going to keep a bus service. Devon County is not going to continue to pay Dorset Council for running that bus service, which is just a transit van that takes them into town and back. It's just not viable. We encourage people to drive everywhere if we have this development.
It is pretty difficult to argue with that point of view, Councillor Brown, unfortunately. Any further comments on this allocation, members? No? Okay, in which case the proposal from Councillor Ingham, seconded by Councillor Hayward, is to allocate in accordance with officer's recommendation here. All those in favour, please. 7, you made us count, Colin. Those against?
I don't think I do count.
Those against? 1. Those abstaining? None. Okay, that is carried then. Thank you to Councillors Dodson and Mackinder. That brings us then to Musbury, and we have back again, first up, site Mus 01B. We have no public speakers, so straight into committee. Could we have 01B up, please, Mr. Dickens? Thank you. Okay, a little corner just to the south of an allocation we've already made. Members, any thoughts? Councillor Jess Bailey.
I think you might be able to guess what my question is. How many allocations have been made in Musbury? Can we have the chart, please?
Whatever the other half of that site is.
15 so far.
Okay, do any members wish to speak on this site? No, in which case I will propose officer's recommendation not to allocate Mus 01B from the chair. All those in favour, please. That's unanimous, which brings us to Mus 05. No public speakers again, so members, any comments? No, okay, in which case I will propose from the chair that we move on from Mus 05. All those in favour, please. That's unanimous, which brings us to Newton Poppleford. Newt 05 and Newt 04, which I believe Mr Dickens are back because we have some more clarification about the footpath.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. In respect to Newt 05, we've received correspondence from the landowner with land registry records that would show ownership of land, which would provide a footpath from Newt 05 up to the little lane that runs parallel with the main high street but avoids pedestrian use of the main high street and the particular traffic concerns connected with that. So on the strength of there being a safe public footpath route from 05, or the potential for, which we would seek to secure through any planning application, a safe pedestrian route from Newt 05 into the village, we're now recommending an allocation of this site for 27 homes.
Okay, thank you, Mr Dickens. And to answer your question, Councillor Jess Bailey, none. None have been allocated so far in Newton Poppleford. Members, Councillor Hayward.
Thank you, Chair. In the absence of the ward member, I appreciate we have the county councillor here who can obviously deal with any highways issues. I can't understand why, without that access to footpath 1, which in itself is not a great footpath, but it's still a footpath that traverses the entire length of the village, why this was originally sort of moved on from. But I understand that with the inclusion of this access and therefore a pedestrian route so that users can avoid car use to get into the centre of the village where the amenities are, that actually 27 dwellings, there is a demand in the village for other dwellings. So on that, I'm happy to propose officer recommendation for this allocation of 27, subject to that all coming through.
Thank you, Councillor Hayward. Councillor Young, do you wish to second?
I second it.
Councillor Hayward, your microphone is still on.
Oh.
Do you want to say it on the record, Jeff?
Yep, I will second this. Regarding the footpath, is it lit or unlit? And it's unlit, but how safe would it be for youngsters to go to the school, for instance, and stuff like that?
I mean, I think, to you, Chair, I think it's not perfect as a footpath. I think it's unmade in parts. I think it's better the further sort of east you go towards the King Alfred Way development, where it was enhanced. I don't think there's much in the way of lighting, but it is off street, so it's safer than a lot of footpaths in the area, I would say, as pedestrian access. Certainly during daylight hours, I think it would be safe for use. I think the issues perhaps arise outside of daylight hours as to whether or not there's enough ambient light spilling into that area to make it safe for walking. But I think it's better in terms of pedestrian access now with that link than I think some of the other sites we've already allocated elsewhere, to be honest.
Okay, thank you, Mr Freeman. We have a proposal made and seconded. Are there any further comments? Councillor Bailey.
This is a really difficult one because obviously there's been no allocations in Newton Poppleford. I think because I'm the county councillor, I do feel particularly concerned about allocating where we're not 100% clear on. I know it will probably be a matter for the planning application, but road safety is a massive issue in Newton Poppleford, so I'm a little bit apprehensive about this one, but I can understand why it's been by my colleagues have proposed and seconded it. Thank you.
Just to be clear, Mr Freeman, would we be conditioning this allocation on delivery of that footpath link?
Very much so, Chair, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments? No, okay, in which case the proposal from Councillor Hayward, seconded by Councillor Young, is to allocate Newt 05. So we'll go to a vote on that one. All those members in favour, please. 7, those against. None, those abstaining, 1. Okay, thank you very much. Newt 05 is allocated then. Welcome to Councillor Fernley, who we should get logged into a mic before we move any further. Thank you, Wendy. Councillor Fernley, did you have any declarations to make?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Only the usual lobbying.
I think that's a given for all of us. Okay, which brings us then to Note 04, which has a recommendation not to allocate from officers. Members, thoughts? Councillor Young.
Seeing this is right next door to the one we've just allocated, and I presume the footpath would be shared between these two sites. I would disagree with the officer's recommendation, and I would propose for this one to go forward.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Young. I will look for a seconder for that. Councillor Ingham? Okay, do we have a seconder for that first? Councillor Levine, thank you. Do you wish to speak? No? Okay. Councillor Ingham.
Can I hear, please, Chair, from Mr. Freeman on his logic for the different recommendations on adjacent sites?
I believe I'd be right in saying it was concern about the extent of allocation at Newton Popford, wasn't it, Mr. Freeman?
Yes, that was certainly a concern. I think other concerns were obviously Newton Poppleford is national landscape, so there's a question how much growth do you put in this location in the national landscape, and the scale of growth for Newton Poppleford as a tier 4 settlement as well, albeit I appreciate it may seem inconsistent with Fennerton in terms of our recommendation there, but I think it's a cumulative impact with the national landscape. With the footpath issue, obviously the site could only link into the existing footpath if Newto 5 is delivered first. So if members were wanting to make an allocation of Newto 4 and felt the scale of growth in this location in the national landscape is acceptable, I would suggest we would need to see the two sites delivered comprehensively together so that the footpath link is there before Newto 4 is delivered.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Councillor Ingham.
Thank you, Chair, letting me come back, because if Newton Poppleford's tier 4 and Woodbury and Livingston are tier 2, is it easy for Mr. Freeman to tell us how many houses there already are in, say, Newton Poppleford and either Woodbury or Livingston, so we understand?
I think Woodbury and Livingston are in tier 3, aren't they?
Yeah, so to confirm, Livingston and Woodbury are tier 3. I don't have numbers of dwellings, but in the role and function of settlement study, it has the population of the settlements, if that helps. If I just scroll to that information.
While Mr. Freeman looks for that, do any members have any comments about this site in particular? As I suspect Councillor Ingham's point goes to the strategy rather than the site. Councillor Hayward.
Thank you, Chair. This is a tricky one for me. Again, I was the former clerk here. There is a need for affordable dwellings, but also Newton Pop is incredibly constrained. That main thoroughfare through the town is not safe. And as much as we try and encourage non-car traffic, there will still be some. There'll be deliveries, there'll be all sorts. I'm torn between the appeal of providing more affordable dwellings for people in Newton Poppleford who need it, but also exacerbating their existing traffic problems. I'll mull on that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayward. Mr. Freeman, do you have some figures for Councillor Ingham?
Yes, so the population, this is residents aged 16 to 74 in Newton Poppleford is 1,179, which is very similar to Fennerton, West Hill, Woodbury and Broadclyst, so of that scale, the population.
Huge difference of Woodbury, allocation of housing there, and we're worried about here. My concern with this national landscape, we're arguably, some people say, desecrating our landscape throughout East Devon, and what the flag someone pinned on it in 1970 is hardly relevant. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, isn't it? And all of our landscape is gorgeous. So that's not too important to me. I do think, what was the expression Councillor Hayward used? What's it? Charred stock and wash its face, and I think it was charred stock, wasn't it? I think it was. And I think Newton Poppleford had to do the same. My last question, Chair, on this one is, I would instinctively, that my fear is flooding. There is problems of flooding in Newton Poppleford. I think it's Lark Rise, wasn't it, Councillor Hayward, that was the last development that actually exacerbated the major problems we had last year. How does Mr. Freeman feel about the effect of these two sites, or is that because it's so far away that's not an issue? So far from the northeast of that map, by the river.
I'm just scrolling through and checking in the report as to whether or not they're in the flood zone. I didn't think they were.
So that's minimal, is it? I'm just double checking.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing as well. I don't think they are. I think they're on much higher ground than the parts of the village that flooded.
That has provoked a sea of hands on my right. I think Councillor Hayward was first.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'm not a water engineer. I would often think that development above the high street, above the red line that runs east to west through the centre, which is in the area of Back Lane and the Back Brook, you can see it there. I think that's where water issues and flooding have been particularly pronounced. All the houses to the north of there were, well, not all, a great many were affected by that significant flood that we had, being so close to the Otter on the far east there. I don't think the dwellings here, certainly not Newt 4, will exacerbate flooding issues. Obviously, there's always a potential for it. And yes, I'm very mindful of Councillor Ingham's point. There are parallels. I mean, Newton Poppleford certainly has far more amenities, I would attest, than Chardstock does. So perhaps on that basis, the additional 28 here, there's a justification. I was struck by the discussions we've had and comments from members of the public about inconsistencies. The problem that we have as a committee is the permutations are just too pronounced. There is no, we shouldn't be using precedent. That's a planning, consideration. There is no precedent. Each thing is determined on its own merits. But where you have water, you have AONB, coastal protection, you have road issues, you have schooling issues. Each one is a separate permutation. So I don't think there is a consistency that can apply, as much as it would be very convenient for us to have that consistency, because we could just tick boxes and go, well, it's here, it ticks those boxes, we must allocate this. But as a committee, we weigh each one up, because each one, each village, each settlement is particularly unique. And that's what makes East Devon so lovely, because they are unique settlements. So I think on that, I do take the point entirely, Councillor Ing. Everyone is having to play their part, and Councillor Bruce spoke earlier about the lunacy of that approach, that we have to allocate. We have no targets per settlement, but we have an overall target, and so we're just trying to be fair and equitable. Thank you. Sorry, that's it, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hayward. It feels to me as though we've explored the issues on this site. So I'm going to take us to, is it earth-shatteringly critical, Councillor Bailey?
I would say so, because I think that on the 9th of May 2023, it was 50 plus properties. It wasn't just Backbrook. It was I'm aware of, fairly close to this site, and it was a lot to do with runoff as well. So I think actually we have to be really careful, and I'm worried that if we haven't done, I know that for some of our sites we've done extra flood work, haven't we? And I don't think we probably have for this. So I think we just need to be really careful, and also because of the road and the constraints around the road.
Yes, just to show members, so this is Newton Popperford, the two sites, well, the site you've agreed to allocate is there. This is the second one here. The flood zone runs across up here and obviously down the eastern side of the village as well. So it's well outside the flood zone and from memory on notably higher ground as well. So I don't think there's particular risks with these sites, and given that position, that they're not sites we'd look at through the strategic flood risk assessment specifically.
They're not sites we'd look at through the strategic flood risk assessment because they're outside the flood zones.
Well, it hasn't flooded that close to the site, as you can see. It's the opposite side of the sort of main road junction on the much lower ground down through Roosden. Well, that hasn't factored into the latest Environment Agency flood maps from the information that we've got.
Councillor Young.
I did visit the whole village the day after the floods in my wellies. Flood water did come down Butlam Lane, and I think some of those properties off that lane, that their gardens were flooded. It was Borough Lane that was hit most, and Borough Close, and then the whole floodplain through there. But if a planning application does come through, it will be reviewed by the Devon Flood team, who did a very thorough investigation of this in association with Environment Agency. So I'm sure that they would pick that up if there's a problem.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Young. That was helpful. Okay, we have a proposal from someone, though I forget who off the top of my head. Perhaps Anita could remind me. No, Anita's not been writing.
Councillor Young endorsed it and Councillor Levine seconded it.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. There we go. It does indeed. So we have a proposal from Councillor Young, seconded by Councillor Levine, to allocate site Nuto 4. Thank you, Mr. Freeman. All those in favour, please. 1, 2, 3, 4. I count 5. Yep. Those against? 1, and those abstaining? 3. Okay, thank you, members. That is carried, which brings us then to Pay Hembury 03. Wendy, can we turn the sound up? Wendy is on that, thank you. Okay, Pay Hembury 03. Mr. Freeman, could we have some clarification what officers are suggesting here? Because we have already considered this site, haven't we?
Yes, you have, members. I think what we were looking at here was under the criteria. One of the criteria for bringing sites back was those that adjoined an allocation that you had already agreed, and therefore there was potential to increase the size of the allocation. So this one met the criteria because you've agreed to allocate Pay H_03A, but it adjoins 03B. So it was for members to consider whether a larger allocation in this location was appropriate, but we are not recommending that you do so.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Freeman. We have a few public speakers for this item then. First up, I have Ms. Naomi Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and councillors. I hope you will have received some pictures that were sent round to you during the last week, one of which is a site plan. As per your officer's notes, this is a highly elevated prominent village gateway site with high intervisibility from southern approach. The site has a high landscape sensitivity to new development, and constraints do not support allocation, but if so, to a maximum of 15. The village is a smaller T4 settlement with only 134 houses. There are already 10 under construction, added to the 15 allocated in Payhenbury 03A, making a total of 25. This is nearly 20% growth and only just an acceptable proportional increase. To extend the site boundary to the south and raise the total number of houses to 46, a 34% increase, would be totally disproportionate and unacceptable, as with some other T4 settlements. You should have also had pictures of a bus and a car struggling to get through the lane past the site. From the pictures, you can see how narrow the lane is as it passes the site. These predominantly single-track lanes continue with few passing places, lack of pavements and verges for 2 kilometres to Fennerton to the south, and 2 kilometres to Cullumpton to the north. Unfortunately, these lanes are used as a cut-through for traffic from the M5 via Cullumpton Road to the A30. And I know this because I live nearby and use these roads on a regular basis, frequently having to reverse. There's also a picture of some beautiful, very old oak trees, and we would strongly question the ability to establish a safe access into the site, giving the bend, blind summit and 60-mile-an-hour speed limit. The visibility splay would necessarily destroy the ancient oak trees and traditional Devon hedges. To summarise, whilst the need to allocate is regrettable, we do understand the need for some growth. The lanes, lack of public transport and other constraints limit this expansion. Taken with the 10 houses currently being built, the existing allocation of 15 is wholly proportional to this village's size, and I thus ask you to support your officer's recommendation not to allocate further 21 houses by extending the 03A site to the south. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Osborne. Councillor Thomas for Payhenbury Parish Council.
Thank you, Chairman. The Council would make it very clear that we would oppose any further development on this site. Payhenbury, as we know, this site forms the entrance to the village. It's a Tier 4 village, which you've discussed many times this morning. This was classed as being not suitable for allocation in 2022. Since then, we have this allocation of 15 houses. We have 10 other, as Naomi has mentioned, that are currently being constructed, which will make us 25, a 20% increase in the size of the village. This is disproportionate. From the southern entrance, the lane steadily climbs to a blind summit, after which it drops to a very bad corner where 2 vehicles cannot pass each other. Also on this bend is the entrance to the sewage works, which, unfortunately for us, has the worst performing sewage works in the county, with 1,709 hours of spillage on 174 occasions in 2023. You did agree that no development could proceed until the sewage works have been upgraded to cope with any current demand. This, however, was not mentioned in your latest agenda. The school, as we have heard in writing from the head, is full with a waiting list, and any future capacity will now be absorbed in the 15 plus 10 which are being built. The school cannot be extended. There is limited employment in the village, So any development of this site would require travel to be made by car due to the lack of any sensible public transport. There are no pavements linking the site to the existing paths and village. Access from the proposed site would currently exit to the highway on the sharp corner, which, as we've mentioned, is continually causing problems. If the exit moves further south along the road towards Fennerton, then it would be near the blind summit and be an accident blind spot waiting to happen. In addition to this increased traffic from this proposed development, there are proposals now for 102 houses in Fennerton to the south, 30 in Plymtree to the west, and 30 at Broadhenbury to the north, from which all this traffic will pass through our village looking to access either the M5 at Clumpton or the A30 at Escott. We are sympathetic to the growth at a proportional rate, of which the 15 plus the 10 we would accept is acceptable just. But we would, bearing all the points that we've said, wish to say that we would want you not to allocate any further housing by extending 3A beyond the south. But I would also like to quote Mr. Freeman, who said earlier on that unfortunately we've had to drop down the tiers to fill in with this allocation. Well, we all know what rolls downhill, and in the absence of a tier 5 settlement, tier 4 settlements seem to be picking up the majority of your excess. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Could you turn the microphone off, please? Sorry. Thank you. Next up, we have a statement on behalf of the promoter, Mr. Dan Yates of Savills.
Yes, that's correct. This statement is made by Dan Yates, planning agent on behalf of the landowner, in support of the allocation of the land at Marcus Park, Payhenbury. I apologise for not being able to make this statement in person. I attended the meeting on Tuesday, but was unable to attend today. We welcome the decision of this committee to allocate site 03A at the last meeting at the end of September, but note this was only a small site area and for only 15 homes. We note the latest report before members recommends that consideration be given to increasing the number of homes to 30 by increasing the density and/or extending the site area to include part of the remaining submitted site area shown in the report as site 03B. We fully support the recommendation from officers that the site should be allocated for 30 homes by extending the site allocation beyond just site 3A. Our position is that all of the land, both 3A and 3B, should be allocated for the 30 homes suggested by officers, and there are very good reasons for doing so. Allocating the whole area would provide much more flexibility to deliver a small increase in the number of homes from 15 to 30, and in doing so, providing a higher number of affordable homes to help address local need. Importantly, by allocating the whole site will enable a much better placemaking solution to be explored by providing more space to accommodate well-designed housing alongside open space and supporting infrastructure. Allocating the whole site will also provide additional flexibility to provide greater biodiversity net gains. The site as a whole is suitable for development with limited constraints, as highlighted in the officer's report. Overall, we fully support the advice from officers to consider extending the allocation area to accommodate a higher scale of development, but we consider it would be sensible to allocate both 3A and 3B to provide greater flexibility to enable the best possible development to be delivered.
Thank you. I have Councillor Richard Jeffries on my list, who I note is not in the room. Do we have a statement?
Yes.
Okay.
So he would like me to read out, it's a bit loud, isn't it? I refer to the report on Payhenbury 03. Much debate and officer recommendation led to allocating 3A for 15 units, not a larger number of dwellings. The The debate concluded a higher number of dwellings would be inappropriate for a settlement of Payhenbury's size. Please note, Payhenbury 01 is already being built out and refer to the size of the settlement, not the population of the wider parish when considering the impact on the village. It is, if there is to be any change in the boundary of site Payhenbury 3A, it should be best accommodate the 15 dwellings, preserve and enhance, the ecology of the Marl Pit area and wider site and buffer existing houses, not to facilitate an increase in the number of units. In addition, please consider if any development should happen before the sewage system is fit for purpose.
Okay, thank you. I must say I agree completely with officer's recommendation in this instance. I think the allocation of O3B would be inappropriate, and therefore I'm going to move from the chair that we move on from this site. Do any members wish to add anything? Councillor Young, then Councillor Ingham.
One of the speakers brought up the issue with sewage. I wonder if Ed can just explain what we would be doing if it became a planning application. Thank you.
Well, I mean, our position across the district now is obviously development can't come forward unless there's sufficient capacity to accommodate flows. So any permission would be subject to a Grampian condition requiring that development can't come forward until that is the case.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Councillor Ingham, then Councillor Bailey.
Yes, I back the proposal, Chair. Sewage, that's just quite shocking, that statistic for Payhenbury. I think it's a shame on a lot of these considerations that there isn't more business units, work units, live work units as well, the split ones. You know, if you want to make something attractive, it's not that difficult. At the moment, I think, Chair, it's fair to say a lot of these sites are getting away with it. I don't think in 10 years' time, when the next emerging local plan comes through, there'll be the necessity to provide jobs in Payhenbury. Hawk Church, I thought I was really impressed with that effort. So I think 25 already. I know what the community's saying. And next time round, perhaps this site will be lucky if they remember to put in, you know, their requests for allocation. But now is not the right time. That Payhenbury is doing enough, I think, and this is next time round.
Thank you, Councillor Ingham. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you. I agree with the public speakers, and I totally agree with you. We need to move on and not allocate this. Thank you.
Okay, in that case then, I'm going to take us to a vote on this one. The proposal from the chair is to move on from Payhenbury 03B. All those in favour, please. That's unanimous. Thank you very much, members. As it is now 11:30, we're going to break for 10 minutes. Okay, members, we will pick up again with Plymtree. And first up then is Plymtree 03, on which I believe we have some officer commentary before we dive into it.
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. If I can draw your attention to the committee report, particularly the site plan in that report, which Mr. Freeman will put on the screen. Is there? Yeah. Okay. So there's two observations really. I think it's important to flag up on this site, which, as you'll see in officer recommendation, contrary to previous SPC consideration, we are suggesting for 30 homes, not the smaller number. Two key considerations I'd flag up on this one is that, firstly, highway access to this site would be from the eastern side. And so therefore, if you were to develop it for a smaller level of development, you would concentrate development around that eastern side, which would leave, I suppose, what might be described as a hole to the west. It sort of invites filling that hole in due course with further development. So you might start off with a smaller scheme at the frontage of the site, but it almost kind of leads in due course to a bigger development at some point, at some future stage in that hole that's left. And I think the other thing that I'd flag up is that in the planning application that's been submitted and illustrated on the screen there, actually just to point out, the blue line illustrates where you would get a 15-house development on the strength of that scheme that exists. So the whole is to the left of that blue line. But on the planning application that has been submitted, there are a significant number of community benefits associated with the scheme that's been put forward. And in the absence of developing out the whole site, it is quite possible, if not probable, that you wouldn't see delivery of those community benefits. So I think there's a couple of key issues there to elaborate on and just to draw to members' attention.
Thank you for highlighting those for us to consider, Mr. Dickens. We come then to our public speakers. First up, Mr. Pete Thomas from Bell Cornwall.
Thank you. Good morning, members. At the previous meeting for Plymouth 03, members heard from the ward member, parish council and an objector who lived close to the site. Our landowner has spoken in support of the scheme, but unfortunately that meant as planning agents we were unable to speak to set out the benefits. We'd therefore like to set these out before you today, before you take a final vote. There are three key points we'd ask you to consider. Point 1, endorsing the officer report. At the previous meeting, members decided to allocate for 15 dwellings, but perhaps weren't aware of the benefits of allocating for 30, which have been illustrated through our current outline applications submitted on the site. Whilst the site could take up to 43 dwellings, the current planning application that has been submitted is for 30, because it's the right thing to do for the village and respects the character of Plymtree. An allocation of 30 will allow for a school car park to improve highway safety in the village, footpath links to local services, improving connectivity, a new village green and much needed affordable housing. We can already demonstrate 30 dwellings work from a technical viewpoint and visually will sit comfortably in an undesignated landscape. A smaller scheme or allocation of 15 will not deliver the considerable community benefits that an allocation of 30 will. Point number 2, the support that these housing numbers can give to the school. There's been a recognition that additional facilities and children are required in the village to help ensure the school thrives. Records online show the school having a capacity of 105 pupils with only 56 children on roll. Additional families are needed locally to ensure the school is supported along with other local facilities. This will be more achievable with 30 houses. And finally, point number 3, the support of local young people with long-standing ties to the village. At our community consultation event held for the planning application, there was support from young people and those with long-standing local connections to the community who hope they may actually have an opportunity to live in an affordable home in the village they grew up in. And also elderly people who may want to downsize. An allocation of 30 houses offering a wide range of housing types in Plymtree will therefore have an incredibly beneficial impact for the community. It will bring families, it will bring a higher amount of affordable housing, the first affordable housing to be delivered in the village for many years, that will sustain it into the future. Taking this into account, we respectfully submit that the site should be allocated for 30, which will bring substantial benefits and sustainability for the people of Plymtree. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas, and I'm assuming we have a statement from Councillor Jeffries.
Yes. I refer to the report on Plym 03 that states that this site could accommodate a higher number of units. The debate in the previous meeting hinged on the appropriate number of dwellings for the village, with the conclusion that 15 was on balance a reasonable number for this small settlement. Doubling this number would not be reasonable. With this in mind, I ask members to consider Plymtree, not the site. I ask members to consider Plymtree, not the site. Surely the village comes first. Please again note the size of the settlement, not the wider parish population, when considering what is appropriate for this village. In addition, please consider if any development should go ahead before the sewage system is greatly improved. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. That's all our public speakers, so we come into committee, and I have Councillor Ingham first.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I do want to speak in support, and will be proposing, allocation of this site. But I do have a question first, and looking at the diagram we have, the plan we have in front of us, and the lines redrawn there, isn't it? Away at the southern part of the map, the red line goes in around an oblong and then comes back to the lane again, doesn't it? In comparison to the actual allocation. Can Mr. Dickens explain that a bit more? I think he said, well, that's maybe development will come at a later stage or something. Is that what he was alluding to, that bit, or what?
I think I'd be right in saying that oblong on the south side is the primary school and some other buildings, isn't it, Mr. Dickens?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's just not part of the site.
But
The
it
issue...
is, isn't it, on the...
No.
Okay, sorry. Okay, well, that's fine. I hear what Councillor Jeffries says, but, for the benefit of the new members, this idea that, we do a compromise within communities, for beneficial facilities. A critic can tell you, it's a bribe. Well, in the village I live in, we didn't have a village green for a huge village, ridiculous. We've now have quite a few houses that were not as pretty as the ones that seduced us, but we do have a village green, which is wonderful. And so, bearing in mind with, the amenity land, school car park, risk removed, so very important, footpath, and holding true on the affordable housing. What can happen is when they offer a carrot, then they take the parsnip back, don't they, or whatever. That's a very bad analogy, but you know what I'm getting at. You think, well, I didn't know that was going on under the table. So as long as the affordable housing number is not reduced, I think this is a cracker, and I think it will be beneficial for their community. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Councillor Ingham. Councillor Young.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. So, just to be clear, then we have a proposal from Councillor Ingham, seconded by Councillor Young, now to allocate in accordance with officer's recommendation.
Clear, because we've already allocated for 15. This is for 30.
So, yeah, okay. So, just to be clear, this is for the full site for
Yes.
30.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Excuse me. Do any other members wish to speak on this one? No? Okay. In which case, Mr. Dickens, can we go back to HDMI 1 just so members can see? PowerPoint.
Do you want me to sign for?
Yes.
Chair.
Wendy has saved us. Thank you. Councillor Ingham?
Sorry, I just want I've gone back and my diagram is different from the one that we've seen.
Right.
The southeastern part on, page 392 is smaller. Do you see? It's the southeastern bit that doesn't go down to the road. What's going on there? Is there a reason for that?
Is that drawing error, Mr. Dickens?
My suspicion it's a drawing error and it would go down to the road, should go down to the road.
Thank you, Chair. Can we make sure that comes back in the minutes? Correct, thank you.
I can't imagine it would be put forward without a connection to the road, so. Okay, any other comments on this site? Okay, in which case we'll go to a vote then. The proposal from Councillor Ingham, seconded by Councillor Young, is to allocate the whole site for 30 dwellings. All those in favour, please. That's 7. All those against? And those abstaining. Okay, that is carried then. Thank you, members. That brings us to Plim 05, where we have no public speakers. So we're going straight into committee. And in view of the concerns that committee has expressed before about the scale of development at Plimtree, I'm going to move straight away from the chair that we move on from Plim 05. Are there any members that wish to comment on this site? No? Okay, in which case the proposal from the chair is to move on from Plim 05. All those in favour, please. That's unanimous, which takes us to Sidmouth, or Sidbury, rather, I should say, but it's listed as Sidmouth Town Ward on my list for some reason.
A mistake.
I believe it's Sidmouth Rural, isn't it, Councillor Loudon? Yes, okay. So we have 2 objectors listed to speak. Before I come to those, Mr. Freeman, Mr. Dickens, could you just clarify, please, what you're asking committee to consider this morning?
It is quite simply that we are recommending that 43A, coloured in green on the map, forms the allocation for 43 homes, and that 43B is not allocated. I think that's right.
Isn't that what we voted on last time?
I think we're inviting reconsideration of the potential for B. Have I?
But you're not recommending that we add anything at B?
I'm just checking the...
I'm glad I'm checking this then.
Which read record?
The application coming in is for both.
The application's for both, indeed, but...
I think we're asking members to reconsider allocation of the whole site, but not for a significantly higher number. So it's for 43 across the whole site, isn't it?
So what number did we allocate for them?
Was it 38 before, if I'm reading this committee report?
Yes, that's right. I think the suggestion is that a more acceptable form of development can be accommodated across the whole site at 43, taking in the less sensitive parts of 34B as well as 34A.
Okay, so a relatively minor change then in the grand scheme of things, but we're being asked to consider it anyway. Members, is everyone clear what we're being asked to consider? That is the expansion of the allocation area to cover the whole site. So 34A, which you see in the top right of the site there in green on the map at the top, and 34B, which is the area in pinky purpley on the top map, but for a housing figure that's only 5 higher, so implying a substantially lesser density on that site. Is everybody clear that's what we're being asked to consider? So why is your hand up, Councillor Young?
I was going to propose it.
Well, we have some public speakers to consider first. I'm just making sure that everybody knows what we're actually being asked to consider before we start talking about it. Okay, in which case then we will come to our public speakers, and first up we have Mr. Philip Parsons.
Good morning. So I have simply 4 points. First of all, there's no safe access to the site. The developer plans to drop traffic into one of the narrowest stretches of the A375, metres from a pinch point and a blind corner. Frequently cars are damaged and cars have shredded their tyres while being forced into the bank. I personally have seen 3 cars destroy their tyres in the last year. Shouting matches occur on a weekly basis. This planned access would increase the danger to all road users, and Devon County Highways previously said the only feasible access would be through Firs Hill when examining a previous application. The developer has discounted Firs Hill as an access. This road is narrow and it's privately owned at its end, leaving no safe access. Floods occur several times a year in the road and houses on Burnt Oak and Chapel Street. Impervious roofing and building access roads will increase runoff. The only channel to remove water from this side of the valley is the small mill leat, which cannot cope with the heavy rains. The clear change in weather patterns will see more frequent heavy rains and will make this situation critical. Savills and LVA have said they will bear no accountability, as it claims it would be the responsibility of the builder to cope with runoff issues. If this flooding happens from runoff, the residents were advised that they would have to sue the planning department of the council. Not an outcome that anybody would want. It would be detrimental to indigenous wildlife, especially if you make it bigger. The Devon Biodiversity Record Centre has reports of land next to the proposed site as a priority habitat and territory for the rare beer bats. Badgers use these fields as a main route across the valley, and countless other animals, insects and birds treat these agricultural fields as their home. It cannot be right to extend the development into this important natural environment. A new build will be out of character to the listed heritage building, overdevelopment in the national landscape on an area of outstanding natural beauty in a village with non-existent public amenities. It just seems bizarre. If Honiton 15 was unacceptable due to building on national landscapes, why would you approve this one? Lastly, I wanted to complain about the notes in the last meeting. The summary comments in the briefing pack makes no mention of any of the negative points and only quotes verbatim the biased comments from the development team. It states it's worthy looking at SIDMA 34B, but I don't remember any of you saying that at the last meeting. I trust in future meetings minutes will be a bit more balanced. So to summarise, this is not the best agricultural field to be developed, and definitely not to be made bigger, due to the fact there's no viable access to the safe site. The development would cause even more flooding. It's out of character for new builds to be next to listed buildings in the national landscape, and it's coalescing developments. It would also endanger local protected species. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parsons. Next up, Ms. Helena Ryan.
Sidbury is surrounded by steep hills, so during periods of heavy rain we suffer repeated bouts of flooding due to runoff. Along Burnt Oak, the runoff gushes down from the fields opposite, including this site. It was so bad last year, the storm drain was unable to cope and a torrent of runoff, gravel and topsoil poured across our garden. 2 of our neighbours had water come up through their ground floors and another had part of their garden washed away. Our house was only saved by having a sump pump installed. Far more frequently, the runoff floods the low-lying parts of the road, such as outside Vale House, outside of Firs Hill Farmhouse, and at other points further on into the village. At times, the road is impassable. Sid Valley is a national landscape area, and due to the steeply sloping nature of this site, the planned houses will be highly visible, not only from the road, but also from the footpath above the site and much of the other side of the valley, including from 2 popular long-distance trails, the East Devon Way and the Sid Valley Ring. Additionally, these properties will also directly overlook the existing houses opposite, leading to a loss of privacy. Furthermore, Sidbury Castle, an Iron Age hill fort and scheduled monument, sits above 34B, and I've been told, possibly unreliably, that Historic England plan on removing the trees to expose the ramparts. A development so close by would have an adverse visual impact. The A375 runs through the village, the A designation indicating a major road generally being amongst the widest and most direct, providing large-scale transport links. While the route through Sidbury Village is certainly the most direct between Sidmouth and Honiton and for accessing the 303, it is neither a major road nor amongst the widest. I can't think of another village in East Devon situated on an A road that has such a narrow, difficult route through it. Combine this with a lack of off-road parking, forcing people to park on the street, and you have at least 10 pinch points to navigate. Buses, farm vehicles, lorries, and the weekly dustbin collection all cause obstructions, which happen countless times every single day. Lucky drivers can pull into a free space to let other vehicles pass. The unlucky must reverse until they reach a wide enough gap to stop in. When two large vehicles meet, the road is completely blocked, with traffic backed up in both directions. Recently, an ambulance, blue lights flashing and sirens going, was amongst those held up when a car transporter and a tractor trailering hay came face to face. To avoid these numerous hold-ups, many parents dropping children at the school now use the back lanes, which brings its own problems. And one local taxi company I know of bypasses Sidbury when taking fares to Honiton or anywhere along the A30 and beyond. The building of additional homes will cause disruption to both village residents and wildlife and involve the destruction of ancient hedgerows. It will also mean a substantial increase in traffic in and out of the village on an already overburdened, narrow road, ill-suited to being an A road and liable to flooding. It's just not sustainable, so please don't make the situation worse for us than it already is. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Ryan. Next up, we have a statement from Mr Dan Yates of Savills.
This statement is made by Dan Yates, planning agent on behalf of Sidbury LVA LLP, the land promoter for sites Sidbury 34A and 34B. I spoke in favour of this site when it was recently considered by members, explaining why we consider the whole site should be allocated. I don't intend to repeat that previous statement, but instead just wanted to use this opportunity to remind members of the benefits of allocating the whole site. The benefits include the ability to deliver a second phase of the Devon County Council multi-use path in order to provide a safe and secure route into the heart of Sidbury, overlooked by the new housing through the entire site. Delivering a slightly higher number of homes overall by spreading development across the whole site will result in the delivery of more affordable housing as a consequence. Indeed, the local affordable need in the Sidbury and Sidmouth area is substantial, so this would be a significant benefit. Bringing forward the whole site will also provide additional flexibility to provide more open space and biodiversity net gains of at least 10%. As stated in the report to members, we can reiterate again that this scheme would include vehicular access via Chapel Street and not First Hill, which would instead be a pedestrian/cycle access only. There would be a single point of access from Chapel Street into the parcel 34A, which in turn would provide access into 34B. This is supported in principle by Devon County Council Highways, and the technical work which supports our imminent planning application will help to explain this. We held a public meeting with Sidmouth Town Council recently to help explain the proposals, and we have committed to holding a public meeting with residents to ensure this site is brought forward with proper engagement with the local community. Overall, we fully support officers' advice for the whole site to be allocated and encourage members to follow that advice today.
Okay, thank you. We'll move then to the ward member, Councillor Loudon. Do you want to try taking your tablet off the stand, John, and see if that...
That too. good to know I've got the chair on my side. Thank you. At page 279 in Appendix A, in the site's description, it says, quote, "The originally proposed site was 4 hectares, but it is recommended that development is kept to the northeast of the site, i.e. 34A, and kept as near to the floor of the valley as possible to mitigate the visual impact." At your meeting of 11th of September, this officer recommendation was accepted and it only allocated 34A as opposed to the whole of the site, which is 34A and B there. To now allocate 34B would be contrary to this recommendation. Indeed, 34B would add to the existing water runoff from this part of the site, and you've heard from residents to that effect. And this has, in the last year, led to not only the flooding of the A375 at Burnt Oak, but has also flooded several properties there. It's proposed that the site should be allocated as mixed use. I'm bemused as to why or how it's being proposed, because at Tuesday's considerations of the site, not one was considered for mixed use, and today we've had one allocated as such. That would be 1 out of, so far, 58 sites. Indeed, if you look at the master plan that LVA have produced, it's not mentioned there at all. At page 80 of the main report, the summary of the proposed site is a one-sided commentary, and I would invite you to take note of what I, as ward member, and Sidmouth Town Council and residents have said, which is no. It's been cited that highways have agreed in principle to vehicular access from the A375. However, on Tuesday, when you considered Honey 18, Mr. Freeman expressed concern over that site where there'd been no certainty received about the site access being achievable. And I make the same concerns here to you. Highways also require safe, secure and lawful access for pedestrians to access this site. This currently cannot be achieved as the A375 has no footpath, it has blind bends, is narrow to the point that 2 cars can only just pass, and vehicles exceed the 30 mph speed limit, and the A375 is regularly used as a reroute when the A30 is closed, so it gets clogged. The only possibility of achieving that is through this multi-use path that gets touted. As of today, there is no such path. It has not got planning approval, nor secured funding, nor a commitment to both being delivered. So I would say to you, Chair, that for the sake of an additional 5 properties, developing another bit of this site is inappropriate and unacceptable. Thank you. Will you be at some point considering Appendix 3 in your meeting?
I will need... Mr. Freeman says yes. I have no idea what is in Appendix 3 without looking.
It's employment land, and it's a question as to whether or not I'm able to address that separately, because it is linked.
But perhaps Mr. Freeman can explain, as he wants to speak anyway.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, in terms of Appendix 3, I think it was just appended to the report for information. It's the list of the employment sites, most of which have already been previously agreed at previous meetings, but some of them are later on this agenda. You'll note Darts Farm, north of the airport, etc. are a couple of employment sites within that, but the majority of the employment sites on that list have previously been agreed. So it wasn't necessarily encouraging debate on that appendix specifically, other than the sites that are later in the agenda.
So, no, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify a couple of things that have come up through the speaker so far. Just to clarify in terms of the recommendation, I appreciate the site assessment report that's in Appendix 1, I think it is. refers to a mixed-use site. That is from previously when we were seeking to allocate more mixed-use sites in smaller locations like this, which I think as time's gone on, we've moved away from, and the mixed-use sites tend to be the larger allocations now. So this is a recommendation for 43 new homes only. It's not proposed to be a mixed-use site. In terms of the access arrangements, should have said from the start, we've had some additional clarity from County Highways on the access arrangements, because I think there were some questions asked last time about the access arrangements, and I was asked a question by a member following publication of the agenda that the assessment update that's in the main body of the report refers to DCC having confirmed to the developer that it was acceptable, but wanting us to check with them that that was accurate. So we have done so, and their response is that in principle, vehicular access could be achieved from the A375 as proposed. However, more details would be needed to fully confirm this and to identify if any mitigation would be required, such as traffic calming. However, it is unclear if safe, secure and lawful access for pedestrians and cycles to the wider network can be achieved without having to travel on the A375. The deliverability of the pedestrian accesses to the north and south of the site would need to be demonstrated. So the sum of that is it's acceptable in principle. There are some concerns about pedestrian linkages and cycle linkages from this site, but access from the A375 is achievable in principle, which is all we need to concern ourselves with today, because obviously an application would deal with the details of that. There's obviously been reference also to the master plan, which I thought it would be useful to just show you. There is a hyperlink in the report. I think we had issues with formatting as soon as we tried to insert it actually into the report, but this is the master plan that the agent was referring to in his speech that Wendy kindly read out for you. So this shows their current proposals. I show you this purely for information purposes. I'm not saying it's acceptable. It would obviously have to go through due process, but it illustrates what the site promoters are currently thinking, and I think this is what was discussed with Sidmouth Town Council recently, so that members can see that. And I think this is the argument they're making, is that a better form of development can be achieved over the wider sites into the least sensitive parts of the site, with landscaping and open space within the remaining parts of the site. So I put that before you to aid your consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Freeman. We have no further public speakers on this site then, so we come to members. Councillor Ingham.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Freeman, for showing us that provisional diagram, but you know, that really is a what if you fancy it. And that's not necessarily what the current landowner or developer would agree to do. For me, we are where we are. Sorry for using that, please, but we are where we are, and we have part of that site already allocated. So that's going to work for our local plan. And we're not here to enhance the profits of local developers or anything else. We're here for housing allocation. We've already hit the spot. The question is, what are the risks if we change our mind, you know, as we're being asked to do so? And I think there's quite a few. I'd have liked Councillor Loudon to have marked my homework on here, because I've written down on it, got visual impact, which I think is really important there, because it's an unnecessary risk going up the valley, isn't it? Then we have, this is my cynicism, much higher number of houses. All of a sudden, you've got this huge area of land that you might want to, you could put 5 extra houses there in your application. You could put 25 extra houses there. And there's ramifications of that. Why do we need to do that? And then there's the greater flooding risk by increasing that land allocation. You could argue, but there'll be improved land drainage. but if you put the extra houses, there won't be. So I believe it's too big a risk. I think if we stick to the original, we could see, well, those of us that are still about here, in 10 years' time, with the next plan, do we want to increase this, you know? And that could be built out with that in mind, so that we check the flooding, we check the visual intrusion, we can control the housing, we can have, contrary to this crazy policy that we've walked away from, where we actually have more live-work units or whatever in rural areas, so to stop commuting. Perhaps we can address that. So I would be proposing, Chair, that we move on from this extra allocation and we stick with what we've already got, purely because the risks are too high if we allocate this one. It's an unnecessary risk.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ingham. I need to look for a seconder at that point, and given what you said earlier, Jeff, I doubt that's you. I saw Councillor Levine's hand first. Do you wish to speak, Yehudi?
Yes, please. I just want to say that I'm really concerned about the access, because in the officer's report there's a photo here of Firs Hill, which is supposed to take all the traffic through. I couldn't get my one car through there, let alone two cars going in and out. So it seems to me that this is really not a good, suitable site for development.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Levine. So we have a proposal then from Councillor Ingham, seconded by Councillor Levine, to move on. Councillor Young, mindful of the time and that it is only a difference of 5 dwellings, but Councillor Young.
Yeah, I feel that the proposal for 30, how many? 38 in a small area without much landscaping is squeezing it in. Increasing it by 5 reduces the risk of flooding, reduces the risk of, it's going to be far better landscaping proposals. There's a lot of trees proposed in the site. Regarding the access, as you say, it's an extra 5, and we've already approved the site for 38. So the access is not an issue. So I would not be supporting the recommendation from my colleagues here.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Young. Are there any further comments on this site? Councillor Howe, for the first time today, unusually quiet.
I was trying to stay quiet. The only reason I have to comment is because actually the seconder's misunderstanding of the situation. The access is not being granted through Firs Hill. Ignoring the photos, the access is proposed off the main road. Shouldn't be an A road, that's a different question altogether, but it is being proposed off the A road, and highways are perfectly happy with that. So there is no access issue as such. So we need to be careful what we're proposing and what we're doing. Following that, I disagree with the proposer anyway. I don't see the risks, because any full planning application will have to assess the impact on the landscape. They won't get away with much more than they're proposing. And I actually think the ability to have a footpath off-road, even if only that short distances, a few hundred yards, will be a great benefit and actually makes the development much more sitting in its environment and better for the local area. So I'm happy to support if we get there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Howe. Not wanting to go around in circles, does anybody wish to add anything? Adding?
Yes.
Okay.
Because we're talking about the footpath access, which Councillor Howe brought up. I do know that patch a bit, and I'm convinced, bearing in mind that East Devon own land just immediately north of the site, you could get a footpath through there quite easily. So that's not an issue.
I'm going to take us to a vote on this one. The proposal from Councillor Ingham, seconded by Councillor Levine, is to move on from 34B, bearing in mind that we've already allocated 34A. All those in favour of that proposal, please. I count 3. Councillor Hayward was grimacing. Okay, those against? That's 6. And those abstaining is none. So that proposal falls. I will look for another proposal. Councillor Howe.
Happy to propose.
Propose what?
The officer's recommendation, extra 5 houses over A and B.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Howe. Is that seconding, Councillor Young? Okay. Any further comments with anything to add? Okay, we will go to a vote then on allocating the whole site for 43 dwellings. All those members in favour, please. 5. Those against? And those abstaining? 2, 3, 4. Okay, that does add up to 9. Thank you. Okay, that proposal is carried then, and Sidmouth 34 is allocated in entirety for 43. Which brings us then to Uplyme, to site Uplyme 01. We have no members of the public. Jess, do you want us to wait? Okay. Okay, Jess is going to sit this one out. Uplyme 01, we have no members of the public registered to speak. Councillor Hayward.
Thank you, Chair. I'd be happy to propose, I know you would have done, perhaps done the same, but propose that the committee endorses the recommendation that it's not allocated. Thank you.
So proposal to move on from Councillor Hayward, seconded Councillor Ingham. Okay. Jeff?
I totally disagree with the recommendation. I think we should be supporting this. If you read the report, Lyme Regis is suffering from lack of housing. Obviously, it's got really critical issues with flooding and with housing on a very steep site. And I think we need to be supporting this one. Thank you.
Councillor Howe, on a roll.
Well, it's started now. Yeah, I wish to ask Mr. Freeman what responses we've had from Dorset Council regarding housing, and particularly in Lyme Regis, because obviously that is what we're looking at here, and I suspect they want us to take some.
Well, the response from Dorset Council is as set out in the committee report, which I can read if that would be helpful.
Go for it.
Okay, so at Regulation 18, Dorset Council commented that Lyme Regis is very constrained both through designations such as the AONB and through land instability. As such, limited opportunities exist at the town to meet its needs both for employment space and for homes. There should be consideration of the opportunities in the vicinity of Lyme Regis to help meet the needs of the constrained town. Sites well related to the town may have the potential to meet its needs, especially for affordable housing, and these may be more suitable than sites within Dorset. I'd say we haven't received any further comment from Dorset to my knowledge. I suspect also it's probably fair for members to consider, if they were minded to allocate this site on the strength of Lyme Regis need, whether the quantum of houses allocated would be considered through Dorset housing requirements or whether through East Devon housing requirements. And the same might also be applied to affordable housing provision, whether any affordable secured ought to be meeting a Dorset requirement on that basis.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dickens. I think you've managed to confuse everyone. But thank you for that. Councillor Hayward.
Thank you. Just coming back after Mr. Dickens' sort of contribution to the thing. Obviously, we understand the need and the legal requirement to consult and to be mindful of other planning authorities' needs. I think that the risk there is if you were to allocate this and then Dorset snaffle up those dwellings because they think it's helping their need, I think that would not go down very well at all. Upline has needs. Upline is also very challenged in terms of its facilities, its road and pavement network. Yeah, and whilst they do have synergies and relationships with their neighbouring town, why would they not? I think this is actually a step too far. I'm very respectful of what Councillor Young says, and we do have an obligation to liaise, but we're talking about the East Devon plan and things that are good and beneficial for East Devon. Upline has seen a fair amount of development in recent decades. And I think the site for this particular site is too far. It's too far outside of Upline Parish. It's away from amenities, and it could cause risk. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, members. Additional comments? Okay. Councillor Ingham?
I want to propose that we take this forward. I mean, you just look at the diagram and you think, is that strategic? I won't swear. I don't think it is, Chair. I think it's not no benefit to Upline, or it's going to be restricted benefit to Upline. Allocating houses, we've got a job to do, but can we complete the exercise without this? I think we can. It would be irresponsible to wipe Dorset's bottom and then put the paper outside Upline. I don't think that's what we should be doing. So I'd say no, stick with the officer's recommendation.
Okay, I'm not seeing any further hands, so I'll take us to a vote on this one. The proposal from Councillor Hayward, seconded by Councillor Ingham, is to move on from Upline 01. All those in favour, please. I count 5. Those against? 1. And those abstaining? 2. Because Jess is outside, so that does add up correctly. I could feel the hesitation in the room at that point. Okay, so Upline 01 we move on from, which takes us then to West Hill. And the ward member for West Hill has magically reappeared. I hope everything's all right, Jess. We have no public speakers for Rear of Hasta La Vista. Another excellent name comes to Strategic Planning Committee. Not sure if that's better or worse than Ting Tong, but perhaps we'll leave that for another day. We have no public speakers registered, so we come straight into committee, and I'm guessing Councillor Jess Bailey probably has something to say.
Thank you. Yeah, West Hill's already pulling its way to delivering, well, there's been allocated 66 houses, and this was never even a second choice site, West 03. It's got even Devon County Council say the access is difficult off that track. So I think considering it's 5 houses, there'll be no benefit. It will be all open market. It's got a difficult access. West Hill's already delivering its fair share of the Tier 4 settlement, far more than many others. And so I think we should just move on, please.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. I will second that. I think we should say hasta la vista to this particular site. Do any other members wish to speak? Councillor Howe.
I note, while watching a planning application dealt with on, I think it was 04 and 18, last week before last planning committee, they decided the application before them was too dense. And I must admit, I just need to clarify what numbers we put on 04. I know it's not what we're talking about directly, but I am concerned that planning committee is not fulfilling its obligations to the strategic planning committee in what it needs to do and how it needs to achieve it. So I just raise that because 03 actually would make up the shortfall they made in 04, I think. Not having to go, but yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. I think you've made your point. Any other comments on this site specifically? Okay, you have a proposal from Councillor Jess Bailey, seconded by Councillor Olive, to move on from West 03. All those members in favour, please. That's unanimous. Okay, thank you, members. As we're coming on to Wimpole sites now, I'm going to ask Councillor Howe to take us through these next three.
Thank you very much, Chair. Right, we've got any speakers for these? No, we haven't, have we?
Not for Wimpole 3. We do for the other two.
Okay. Well, first off, Wimpole 3, taking an easy one. We have no speakers on Wimpole 3, so any committee? Hang on, we have a...
You're not registered on 03, Simon?
Apologies, I'm certain I emailed to register on 03 and 08.
We've got you for 07 and 08.
Okay, that's all. Yeah.
I didn't think 07 was one of yours.
All right. If you wish to speak, I'll let you speak. Solves that problem. Okay, in that case, into committee. I'll move from the chair. We move on from 03 as per officer's recommendation. Committee? In that case, no speakers. We'll take a vote, please. All who wish to move on from 03? Unanimous. Thank you very much. In that case, we'll move on to 07. And we have Simon Coles, if you wish to speak on this one.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for that. The sad town planner in me has quite enjoyed the debate on the settlement hierarchy. But I'm kind of with Councillor Hayward, actually, about the distinctive nature of East Devon's settlements. Wimpole's Tier 4 settlement. It's got a really good range of services and facilities, actually better than quite a few other Tier 4 settlements, but the way it's distinctive is it's got a train station. Fennerton's got a train station, it's the only other Tier 4 settlement that does. Fennerton doesn't have a post office, it's got no GP, and it's got a pub. Wimpole has got a post office in a shop, a GP surgery, and wait for it, 2 pubs. Those points are kind of relevant when we'll come on to 08 next as well. But dealing with 07, most of the site's in a floodplain, as you can see. And so nobody's going to be developing there. But to the right of the delightfully named Rats Cottage off Broadcliff Road, access could be taken, and around 5 dwellings probably could be put in there. It's not a lot, but every little helps, doesn't it, in this case? And, you know, Tier 4, moderate growth, I think it makes some sense, members. It's Green Wedge, but actually the Green Wedge is a kind of interesting designation there because the whole of that area is surrounded by housing. And so to put dwellings closest to the village centre, it's within a stone's throw of one of the pubs, the primary school, and the GP surgery. Kind of makes sense to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ward member, would you like to make any comments?
I'll speak very briefly. Thank you, Chair. Firstly, a point of fact, it's Rats Castle, not Rats Cottage, which I think Mr. Freeman has just observed is even better. But there we go. My view on the sites in Wimpole is if we had a level 2 strategic flood risk assessment to look at the issues around the critical drainage area in Wimpole, then I would find it very difficult to say we shouldn't be having a conversation about the level of growth in Wimpole. Regrettably, we don't have a level 2 flood risk assessment, and I don't therefore think it would be appropriate for committee to consider allocating either of the 2 remaining sites. I don't think I need to say anything more on this one.
Thank you. Councillor Young.
Is this in the built-up area boundary, so it would come forward in an ordinary planning application, say for 5, as the agent was saying?
It's not currently within the built-up area boundary, but obviously we're looking to draw settlement boundaries as part of this plan. So an option would be to draw the settlement boundary to accommodate part or all of this site if members were so minded.
Councillor Ingham.
Thank you. I take on board, of course, that over half of this site is within a floodplain, but that looking at the housing density adjacent to it, I think 10 is far too much. If you were going to make 10 is far too big, but I'm sure you could allocate 5 and reduce the size of the allocation to totally avoid the floodplain and therefore accommodate some housing. And it is near to the centre of the village, which is important. I don't know how other members feel.
Well, currently, we don't have a proposal. Are you making one, or?
No, I'm asking other members to join in the debate. Would it be appropriate to allocate 5 and reduce the size of the allocation?
Councillor Olive.
I wouldn't have a problem with Mr. Freeman's suggestion of looking at this as part of the settlement boundary discussion. But as I say, we don't have a level 2 strategic flood risk assessment. I don't think committee can reasonably allocate this site. Mr. Freeman, could you clarify that, if that's okay, Chair?
Yeah. So I mean, we have issues in terms of the modelling, in terms of the critical drainage area and flooding issues at Wimpole. We haven't done the modelling for this site because we haven't been recommending it. We've tried to minimise the cost implications, so we say, of that modelling, which is an expensive exercise. So I think an allocation would be difficult to justify based on the evidence we've got. But as Councillor Oliver said, I think if you wanted to, shall we say, encourage development of this site, then you could draw the settlement boundary quite easily around to include it, and then it could come forward as a windfall site during the plan period with the applicant doing the flood risk modelling to demonstrate that it's acceptable.
I would propose that we move on from the site, but ask Mr. Freeman to bear that in mind with the realigning the boundary for an option in the future.
We have settlement boundaries coming up at a later meeting anyway, so that's fine. Councillor Hayward and then Councillor Bailey, Jess Bailey.
Thank you. I'd support that proposal from Councillor Ingham. I think the point is well made that we can't allocate, although we have allocated over the last period some sites that had some flooding issues for various reasons. But perhaps this is one, mindful of what Councillor Ingham has put forward, that when we look at the BUABs, it just forms a windfall site at some point if all the due diligence work can be done to make sure that any residents who live in that area are protected from flooding and we don't put them at harm. So happy to support.
Councillor Bailey.
I worry that we're being a bit inconsistent, that Newton Poppleford, that very close to that site, houses internally flooded last year, no strategic flood assessment and an allocation. Here, yes, some of it is in the flood risk 2 or 3, but that seems to, we require a full detailed piece of work around it. So, you know, I think we need to be consistent.
I don't wish to come back. We need to move on. I mean, that's the whole point. Mr. Freeman made that point about justification for a very expensive report. So nevertheless, we have a proposal and a second. Proposal is to move on. Can I please have a show of hands? 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. And against? And abstentions? 2 abstentions. Thank you very much. In that case, moving on to Wimple 08. Simon again.
Thanks, Chair. Okay, the last time this came before you, there's a really good debate actually. I made the points about settlement hierarchy, railway station, affordable housing need. There'd be no development allocated in the current local plan. And the debate kind of followed the course of discussion around buses and trains and the orchard. And it was a good debate. Just in terms of the trains though, I think actually it's a pretty good service. In the morning and in the evening peak, they're the same trains that stop at Honiton and Axminster. It's a 15-minute journey. They leave every hour from Central in Exeter. In the morning, 7:23, 8:03. It's not a bad service, members. And on the orchard, I don't think anyone's suggesting for 1 minute that anyone would try and develop it. It's a key part of Wimple's heritage as a cider-making settlement. So I would suggest that orchard is part of a community orchard scheme, maybe given to the parish council, with some refurbishment of the orchard, new tree planting. It's looking a bit scrabby, to be honest. And it provides a brilliant link straight into the heart of the settlement from the north, directly onto a 20 mph limit on a small lane. And it could actually fulfill quite a nice community role up there. There's access already with good footpath connections from Bramley Gardens. And the western boundary can be landscaped really nicely to provide a strong western edge to the settlement. So I'd say, look, this site scored really well last time round. It was a second choice. It scored equally to the site that members chose to allocate. And I'd say this has got a lot going for it. I appreciate the comments about the strategic flood risk assessment, but look, there's a big part of this site that could easily be developed and could easily come forward. The applicant paying the costs of modelling at the time. And for me, I think it would be hasty. Just in terms of the hierarchy and how that works, the 35 new homes that have been allocated account for about 80 people. That's about a 7% increase in the population. When you look at a moderate increase, well, that's tiny, members. That is tiny. And really, that's playing catch up on the lack of an allocation in the last local plan. So I'd say there's plenty of scope to allocate this site. Thank you.
Perfectly on time. Thank you very much. Ward member.
I think I'll reserve to see what the rest of committee thinks first, please, Chair.
Thank you very much. Committee. Councillor Ingham.
It's a question. It's a question first, Chair, really, as I want to hear from our officers on why they feel the whole of this site. I can understand why the whole of this site they're saying no to. Why is there no suggestion that a small part of this site doesn't come forward? I'm minded. Well, I want to hear what the rest of the committee say, but you can see how that the flood zone goes through the centre of the site from kind of southeast towards northwest. I would say, why couldn't we, because I think access is easily achievable, why couldn't we ask for, move on with this? I'd like to move on with this site, but to ask Mr. Freeman to consider expanding the built-up area boundary to include that parcel of land that's north east of that floodplain, yes, within the site. So that's like 2/3 of the site. We're not asking him to include, but we're just expanding the built-up area boundary so we can have windfall sites over the next 5-10 years northeast of that floodplain. So we're not intrusive on or creating extra risks for the community by building on a floodplain. And the idea maybe being to include, if it isn't already, the woods within that as well. So it's protected amenity land. It can be allocated amenity land. So that would be beneficial for the community. I don't know how other members feel about that as a compromise. Move on, but ask for the built-up area boundary to be reconsidered by Mr. Freeman.
So you're proposing move on?
Yes, with that proposal.
Proviso I'm not so worried about. The move on is what I want to get. Do I have a seconder for that?
I'll second that. No one else will.
Councillor Olive is going to second that. Councillor Yehudi, you want to speak? It's the blue stripe, but if you read the report, the flood zone is not an issue on this site. Anyway, so we have a proposal to move on. Councillor Bailey.
Well, I don't like greenfield development, but this is a tier, and I'm not going to make myself very popular with our chair, but the reality is this is a tier 4 settlement. There's only been 35 houses allocated. It's got lots more things like a train station than a lot of tier 4 settlements which don't. And compared to Fennerton, it's having way fewer houses. So I just don't think the committee's being consistent, and I don't think it's been consistent with other communities. And we have to try and be fair, and we have to. And so I'm worried about moving on, because I think when you look at the ground, it's really difficult to justify not allocating any houses in this site. And I don't like it. I don't like any of this, but that's the reality.
Councillor Young.
I share the concerns of my fellow councillor on this.
Which one?
Councillor Bailey. Now, we've allocated 35 for Wimpole, and it has got a train station. How can I justify that to the residents that I represent in villages that have taken far more, and therefore I want to see some development on this site.
Just to give you notice, I withdraw my proposal.
Okay, so we have no proposal on the table at present. Councillor Young. Councillor Olive.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm not going to make myself very popular with some residents in my village. And where's the camera that's pointing at me? It's going to be on that side. Somebody rang me up a few weeks ago and threatened violence against me as part of this strategic planning process. So I'm looking specifically at characters in Wimpole who know who they are. Don't stir the pot. Thank you. Members are absolutely right. Wimpole has the services to support additional growth. I've been clear with my residents that I think that, and okay, fine, Wimpole has its problems. You can never get an appointment at the GP surgery because it's an offshoot of Coleridge, who have their own problems. I don't think I've had an appointment at that offshoot of the surgery for about 15 years, which for context is pretty much the entire time I've lived in Wimpole. This site is of the sites that members have considered. It's south of the highway's pinch point in the centre of the village. If you access it off the existing access that's present there at Bramley Gardens, you're not creating any issues on the way into the village. I would strongly resist anything kind of south of the existing built-up area line, because at that point you are encroaching on the entrance to the settlement, whereas if you stay kind of in the vicinity of that blue hatching that runs through the site, then you're not. And I've got to say, I would find it very difficult to rationally oppose an allocation on that part of the site. Fundamentally, I know some folks in Bramley Gardens who I will make myself very unpopular with for saying that, but ultimately it's not, you know, okay, fine, it's inching slowly towards Cranbrook, but it's well below the brow of that hill which runs along that site. I know there was some debate about whether or not it would be included in the revised Green Wedge for that reason. And the community benefits in terms of access to that orchard, yeah, we don't have public access to a lot of our orchards in Wimpole, and it's part of our heritage. I'd find it very, very difficult to oppose an allocation here, and as such, I'm going to take the bullet rather than letting Councillor Young do it for me, and propose that we allocate part of the site in the northern half with a line that comes no further south than the edge of the existing built-up area, with the exact boundary to be agreed or delegated authority to be given to the Assistant Director in consultation with the Vice Chair to determine the exact boundary of that allocation and the number of homes that it should have on it. That's my proposal.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hayward, are you happy to second that?
I think Councillor Young probably wants to second it, but I just wanted to make a comment based on that.
Can I deal with the seconding first, then in that case, Councillor Young?
Yeah, I will second that. Have we got a ballpark figure of quantity of housing? Or because we're going to be needing that before we wrap up today, won't we?
Well, the whole site was proposed for 178. Officers are kind of recommending 50, but I think that needs to be again part of that discussion where the lines are drawn. So I'm leaving that kind of open at this minute in time. But if you're happy to second along the lines of the proposal, thank you. Councillor Hayward, then in that case.
Thank you. First part is just to say, if I pass one more module, I can offer Councillor Olive some close protection services, bolt onto my licence. But really, it's to thank him for that statement he made, because it typifies what this committee is tasked with doing and how each of us live in the communities where we're considering. But we are having as part of this role to make decisions that are unpalatable. I've used that word before. But that's the duty of this committee, is to think of the whole of East Devon, not just where we live. And a lot of decisions we make will render us non persona grata in the local pub or wherever, but that's why we do it. And it's not nice, but we still carry on. You know, from a town that has taken considerable amounts of allocations in this process, we have a train station. Honiton has a train station, Fennerton has a train station, Cranbrook, you know, is its own entity and has taken a considerable amount where once there was just fields. So I'm grateful, Councillor Olive, for the statement you made, because, and I hope people watching will realise that it's unenviable what we have to do, but we still do it, and that you have acknowledged that there is no reason to refuse this, despite probably personal reasons that you'd rather it not, but that's where we are. So I'm glad it's been seconded, and I'll be supporting it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fernley?
Thank you. Yes, I'm in agreement. I wish to support Councillor Olive for his brave statements around his own area. environmentally, we need to be supporting the areas that have got the train station. So we are trying to get people off the road where possible. So yeah, I'm with him on that. Our little village of Broadcliff took 38 homes the other day. We don't have a train station. There's one road into Exeter that is virtually nose to tail at those sorts of times. So anywhere that we can try and do a little bit around the train stations, I think is very welcome, and I'll support this. Thank you.
Thank you. And just having a quick think. Mr. Freeman, are you okay?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, we're happy to take away the motion if members go with that. I think it would be access from Bramley Gardens from what we said, and we think the number of 50 probably is achievable, actually.
Right, in that case, we have a proposal to recommend this, subject to drawing of the boundary and a number of approximately 50. Can I please have a show of hands? Unanimous. Thank you very much. In that case, Chair, I'll hand back to you.
Thank you very much. I think I'm going to go and dig out a bunker for myself. Next up then, a really fun site for members to consider, development next to the M5 and north of Topsham. Could we get the PowerPoint back, please? So we stop looking at the site in Wimpole. Okay, development north of the M5, north of the M5, south of the M5, north of Topsham. Mr. Freeman, do you have any updates for this site on it?
I've already knocked it over already, so I'm reluctant to put it down without the lid on. I'm trying to think where we got to with this, because there was quite a lot of commentary, I think, when it was considered previously, in terms of the relationship with the developments coming forward in the city, which you may recall takes in various areas to the north of the, well, west of the M5, down to some sites south of the railway line as well. And we had a slide, which I don't think we've actually got, have we, Matt? Which showed that comprehensive development of that wider area. So we've had discussions with officers at Exeter City Council who are quite open to a joint master plan across the whole area that can look at how infrastructure can be brought forward in that area, including a primary school, to try and service that area in a coordinated way. And some potential wording that can be carried into both local plans to marry up how that would work and how that's delivered. So we do think, accepting that there are some constraints in terms of particularly pedestrian and cycle access from there, that through a coordinated approach we can deliver a reasonably sustainable urban extension in this area. So the proposal is for a mixed-use development, in this case 510 homes plus 2.4 hectares of employment land, as I say, subject to a policy that requires this through a joined-up master plan with Exeter City Council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Freeman. We have first up to speak from the public, Mr. Stuart Hewlett.
Good afternoon, members. I'm speaking on behalf of the majority landowners for the north of Topsham site, which we believe can make a key contribution to the council's planned strategy. It provides a sustainable and logical urban extension to Exeter and will deliver comprehensive mixed-use development. We've reviewed the matters raised at the last meeting in respect of the site and note there were two key concerns raised by members. These related to sustainability and the need for master planning. From a sustainability perspective, we would contend that an urban extension to Exeter and Topsham and the access of wide services and facilities that the city provides is the most sustainable option for the local plan in delivering strategic growth. This was endorsed by the council's own sustainability appraisal, which scored the site highly against a range of criteria. The site's context, as we've just heard, is very important, and when taking into account the existing consented and planned growth in this location, it's clear the site does form part of a key strategic growth area. It's also well related to a range of services and facilities, and of course, as a mixed-use development, will support self-containment in its own right as well. In addition, it provides a prime opportunity to help support the delivery of the extension of the Cliffs Valley Regional Park. The site benefits from good connections to Exeter and Topsham through public transport, including regular bus and rail services. We've provided an indicative framework plan to the council, which demonstrates that development can deliver a new spine road alongside improvements to Cliffs Road to support the potential for new bus routes, which was a key issue raised at the last meeting. It also shows pedestrian and cycle linkages throughout the development with wider connection to the existing network. Other connectivity options, including crossing the railway line, remain under consideration, and there is further work ongoing in respect of that. At the earlier meeting, members also identified the need for master planning, which we fully supported then and continue to fully support, and have ourselves commenced the visioning work from which the framework plan has already been developed. We also endorse taking a strategic approach through cross-boundary discussions and the coordination of infrastructure. However, we do believe that this is best achieved in the context of the site having been confirmed as an allocation. It's clearly suitable as a strategic site, and on that basis, the policy wording of an allocation provides the opportunity to embed the need for comprehensive master planning and to importantly confirm the commitment of all the relevant parties to deliver it. This was the approach taken towards the site at the Regulation 18 stage, and one we would fully support now as part of the Regulation 19. Given the unconstrained nature of the site, the scale of benefits it can deliver, and its overall sustainable location for an urban extension to Exeter, we fully believe the site will make a significant contribution to addressing the plan's housing shortfall and other identified needs, and will help move the plan forward in a robust and sound way. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hewlett. We then have Councillor John Manser from Cliffs St George Parish Council.
Thank you, Chairman, and also thank you to Ed Freeman for his update on the negotiations with Exeter City. Really, I just want to raise the profile, if you like, of links, particularly a safe walking and cycling route into Topsham from that area. The current residents are finding that the southern part of Cliffs Road leading into Topsham is unusable for walking and cycling as it's so narrow. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Manser. Councillor Howe.
Thank you, and probably following on from what you were saying on your ward and in your area. The reality is this is in my ward. It's two small communities either side. It is in Cliffs St George, which actually is a unsustainable community, full stop, but it's considered part of Exeter effectively. We are in East Devon, but nevertheless, and as such, as much as I'd like to say no, every bit of logic says it's got to go ahead. So I'm happy to propose, Chair.
I will second that, Councillor Howe. We will then come into the rest of committee, and I have Councillors Ingham and Bailey to speak. Oh no, did I not see your hand? Somebody did over there. Councillor Young maybe, but either way, it's Ben first.
Thank you. Chair, I'm a bit concerned. Looking at that map with the pink, then looking at page 303, you look at the map and I'd say, I'm not sure I approve of allocations east of the road, which is shown. And then on this diagram, you can see that there's nothing east of the road, the lane, yes?
So just to clarify, the two sites east of that road are separate allocations, which are the next two on the agenda. So that we're talking about now
Purely
the sort of long,
west.
thin one that's west of that road.
Brilliant, thank you. Then I'm happy to approve, second the proposal.
Councillor Young, nothing to say? No? Okay. Do any other members wish to speak on this site allocation? Councillor Fernley.
This is the long pink site, yeah? Just checking, yeah. Beggingman's confused me. This is a site that in lots of ways I would really prefer not to allocate, but if we can mitigate the noise from the motorway, it's got pretty good cycle links across into Exeter, up towards Soughton, then you go across to the Science Park and up to the airport. So from that perspective, it's pretty good. You can also get into Newcourt and to the trains. So as much as there's stuff not to like about this, I would support the proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Fernley. I think the sentiment that we don't really like it, but it's probably something over which we have relatively little choice, is something that we will all share. I would pause for a moment to strongly endorse this coming forwards as part of that master plan jointly produced proactively with Exeter. Do you want to show that, Mr. Freeman, or?
I can't, Matt, if you just quickly. I was just mindful we didn't have the previous slides, but just to remind members, this one shows you the area we're talking about in terms of this current allocation in red. The green areas are already applications or consented within Exeter. In fact, this is built out now. And the blue are the allocations that are coming forward in the Exeter plan. And this analysis sort of showed the relationship with services and facilities. So as Councillor Fernley's rightly said, there's Old Ryden Lane coming through here, which provides a route over the motorway and into the Newcourt development and into these parcels coming forward here, and potential options possibly for a pedestrian and cycle route coming through to the south that also brings you into Newcourt, which has a number of services and facilities, as well as Topsham down to the south here. So if we can get that coordinated approach and those routes correct, then I think we can make this sustainable. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. I think committee is probably about to vote to take your word for that. But shall we find out, members? You have a proposal from Councillor Howe, seconded by Councillor Olive, to allocate this site to the north of Topsham. All those in favour, please. That's unanimous. Okay, that brings us to Cliff St George 20 and, sorry, Councillor Hayward.
Sorry to interrupt you. Would the officers be able to call up the total of where we are now? Because we started the meeting, I believe, with 711 shortfall. Would they just be able to factor in those allocations that we have approved, endorsed, and let us know where we are, please?
One moment, please. Councillor Brown's figure is correct, and we are 49 over now, so we have achieved the 10% buffer.
I think you're wrong. I think you're double counting a number of figures.
Councillor Howe thinks we're double counting some things.
You're 19 short so far, only 19, but you're 19 short. Because a number of the allocations we've increased the number of, so it's only the increase we can take.
I would also stress that members agreed to allocate 2 sites on Tuesday with delegated authority to officers to resolve quite fundamental issues, so I don't think we can necessarily rely on those. I would also say I think I'm right in saying the only 2 remaining sites, residential sites recommended for allocation, are the other 2 sites adjoining the site you just considered. And actually, the additional numbers there would help to make it more sustainable and support delivery of services and facilities there. So I wouldn't want to discourage members from still considering those sites, and the recommendations for those, I think, should still stand regardless of the numbers.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Freeman. I'm going to take us into the next couple of sites, because no matter where we are with the numbers, we need to finish going through the agenda. So we'll move on then to Cliff St George 20, please, unless members would like to break for lunch now. Should we finish these next two sites and then break? Okay. So, Clifton George 20 then, and again, we have the parish council. Okay, the parish council have no comment, so we come straight into committee then. Councillor Young.
Yeah, these two, this site and the other one, they are on the other side of the road, and with master planning and working in conjunction with the Cliffs Valley Regional Park, which hopefully will expand down to this, where you see the dotted line there, or the shaded area. There is by including the Cliffs Valley Regional Park in this master plan would be a great benefit. So you would have a far bigger area for people to enjoy the countryside, and at the same time developing the houses that will be overlooking the country park.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Howe.
Thank you. To be honest, it's one of those. I think we're close enough now. I don't like this one particularly because it does breach the road, and I think it's easier keeping a hard line to know where you are. But at the same time, I do want to make a comment about the map, because we are on the map showing South 09 and South 03 as allocated sites, and of course they're not. They should be removed from the plans, just as a sideline. But other than that, as I say, I like hard landscape, hard borders, if you get me, where you know where you stand and where you are. But that's my view.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. I'm going to make an intervention at this point. I have some sympathy to the hard boundary argument. Of course, there is a river to the east with a substantial floodplain, which I think I would fairly safely characterise as a pretty hard boundary. I think in view of actually making sure that we make the best of what is going to be a strategic extension to Exeter, given that there are no overriding other considerations, I think it would be appropriate to include this site as part of the strategic extension. It gives you some extra houses that can contribute to the viability of delivering community infrastructure on this site. And in view of that imperative, I will propose from the chair that we allocate site Cliffs St George 20. Sorry, Mike. Sorry. Do any members wish to speak? No? Okay, in which case we'll go to a vote on that then. All those in favour of allocating Cliffs St George 20, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8. And those against? 1. And those abstaining? None. Okay, thank you, members. That site's allocated. Cliffs St George 24, Cliffs St George 24, where officers are recommending we allocate Part A to the west, but not Part B to the east. I have the parish council, if you have anything to add. Okay, happy with officer's recommendation. Thank you. We come into committee then. Councillor Howe, do you have anything to add?
Nothing further to add, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Young?
Propose to take it forward.
Is that proposing officer's recommendation of allocating A and not B? Okay, I will second that. Do any members wish to speak? No? Okay, in which case we will go to a vote on that one then, and we'll take those two separately. So those in favour of allocating 24A, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 8. Those against? That's 1. Those abstaining? Should be none. Very good. Okay. So 24A is allocated. And those in favour of moving on from 24B, please. That's unanimous. Okay. Do we want to do Cliffs St George 25 at Darts Farm, or should we break now?
John's going to stay on anyway. So.
Oh, right, okay. We'll do 25 as Councillor Mance has to speak. Sorry, good spot there, Mike. So coming on to Cliffs St George 25 then, please, Mr Dickens. Thank you. This is the employment site at Darts Farm, where members asked officers to have a look at a potential small allocation here. Officers, is there anything to add?
So, yes, so members, you may recall, looked at this site which officers were not proposing to allocate for employment land at the time, but I think it was felt that a larger expansion of Darts Farm as a complex could be accommodated and would be good for the local economy. So you'll see in the agenda report, it's not on the screen, apologies, but in the report there is an outline of a lower part of the site, the southerly part of the site, which is proposed for allocation for employment purposes. It amounts to 1.5 hectares and is considered to be the least sensitive part of the site in terms of landscape impacts. So that's the recommendation. So yes, apologies, it's not the full area that's shown on that plan. It's effectively the southern half of that site.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Freeman. We come first then to Mr. Leston John.
Apologies. Thank you, Chair, Committee. We very much welcome the proposed allocation of the southernmost lowest portion of CLG 25 for employment purposes. As I think I said when I presented on this site recently, this is very important. It will enable Darts Farm to progress its expansion via an area of land which is very much lower than the rest of CLG 25. Is very well screened and within a low-lying area, and is within the context of existing employment uses, not only at Darts Farm, but in the immediate vicinity as well. We view that this is a vital opportunity for the land to be allocated, in that it will deliver benefit and jobs, not only for the businesses there at the moment, but also for the local community, for East Devon, and in parallel with the emerging housing, which you've been discussing over the last 6 weeks. So therefore it will support not only Darts Farm, but all the many companies which Dart Farm supports themselves. And we therefore ask you to accept Officer's recommendation and to go with the allocation that's put forward for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. John. The Parish Council.
Thank you, Chairman. The one concern that we would have is the access to this site. The car park at Darts Farm is chocker at times, particularly during holiday seasons, including Christmas and Easter. So it's going to be difficult to get a safe route in for supplies and things to a new area of employment there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Manser. Coming into committee then, members, Councillor Young.
Yeah, I share the Parish Council's concern about access. I use that car park quite a bit, and most people that use Darts Farm are not very good at parking, so there's an issue there. So as long as we have good access into that site, it's tucked out of the way. There's a lot of industry around there already, a lot of commercial properties. So I would support this recommendation.
Is that a proposal, Councillor Young? That's a proposal. I will look for a seconder first. Councillor Ingham, you happy to second? Do you wish to speak?
Yes, Chair. When we keep allocating hundreds, thousands of houses, we have to bear in mind where these people are going to work. And as a member, I've seen over quite a number of years how Darts Farm has changed from Pickfresh, you know. Well, actually I wasn't a councillor when it was Pickfresh, but I know of it. And it's been a roaring success. And I'd like to see this site come forward in the hope that perhaps a few hundred people that daily go from the south up to that roundabout at the George and Dragon, either turn left, go straight on, actually turn in and work there, rather than driving to Marsh Barton, Soughton, or anywhere else. So I think it's the responsible thing to do. If we have a site that can come forward, we should take it to stop commuting.
Thank you, Councillor Ingham. Councillor Hayward.
I'm happy just to support the comments that have been made. From an economics perspective, it's very good for East Devon. It's very popular. I was there a few weeks ago. I suppose it would come back to the point that was raised by the parish council. That's a consideration for the planning committee, is to make sure it's safe, accessible, that the displays are there, and that it doesn't worsen or aggravate any traffic issues for residents or existing users. But overall, it's a success. It adds to the economic vibrancy of East Devon, so let's support it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hayward. Any further comments on this site? No, okay, in which case then we have a proposal from Councillor Young, seconded by Councillor Ingham, to allocate Cliff St George 25. All those in favour, please. That's 8. Those against? Those abstaining? Okay. Thank you very much, members. Is that a sensible place to break for? I'm seeing some nods. Okay, in which case then it is...
Can I just clarify where we are in terms of numbers?
We will have an update for that when we resume after lunch from Mr. Freeman, to give him some time just to make sure that the numbers are correct. Yes, get your abacus out, Ed. Thank you very much. It is 20 past 1, so I will not be rejoining committee after lunch. So when do you want to resume, Mike?
Well,
2 o'clock?
2 o'clock at the late, yeah.
Okay, committee will resume by 2 o'clock.